change, we would still somehow, and there are options for how we do Zoom, and you're going to experiment with it tonight.
Yeah.
I mean, we can be in the same room if everybody's muted. The only criteria really is the ability for interaction. So if people come here in person, they can be here. Do you have?
Yeah, so we just figured out that audio is muted.
Oops.
And so you might want to start again because everyone saw you talk but didn't hear you say anything.
Thank you.
So is it on now?
It's on right now, yes.
All right. Okay. Thank you very much,
Yeah,
Christy.
so you might want to start again.
So let's try this again, folks.
It's a new equipment for us.
Yeah, we're trying out some new things to see how we can do this going forward. So thank you for showing up. Thank you for joining us. We're starting a little late because of some traffic on 525 that caught a bunch of us for line painting. We are in person without masks because there are no children present and everyone here is vaccinated. So according to the requirements, we are allowed to do that. We are meeting, the school board is meeting in public, right here through the live stream, but it is not a meeting with the public. We have opportunities for you to join in the discussion or comment at our board workshops like later tonight, and also at our business meetings during the public comment period, which will be towards the end of the month. I think that's everything I covered, just a lot faster and shorter.
Yeah. So anyway, back to the options for meeting in public. Our understanding at this time is that as long as there's opportunity for the public to be able to make comment or engage in some way, if they are remote, we can meet in public. And there are fewer restrictions for spacing and for masking. So we could, for example, have a meeting in this room. The board could be in its usual seats. We could have chairs in the room. If there are children present, then we would all need to wear masks. So if we have children presenting or folks bring their children, then we all wear masks. But the spacing is still relaxed to the maximum extent possible. We can have an overflow room, so we could put something in another room, and then if folks wanted to come in and make their comment, they could walk in, be at the podium, make their comment, and then if they chose to, they could be back in the other room. So again, you can do it, it's just not as easy as just a regular meeting in public.
So it sounds like it would work better for a business meeting than a workshop.
Yeah, I also wonder if, for example, we're live streaming now, do we live stream and give people a way to make comment that you might read? Because that would give them the opportunity to interact rather than it being a Zoom meeting. Yeah. So I think that's a possibility. If we simply have the live streaming on and then say, if you want to make your comment, it's the board president will read it, same criteria. If you give your name and location and it's limited, you'll read the first 3 minutes if it's longer than that. But what the board has been doing is not really what you typically have done, this back and forth comment.
Right.
It's that you make a comment, and then if folks want to join, they can come in person. So that's what I know at this point. It may change again, given the CDC and the Department of Health. We are still under Department of Health guidelines, which means, as you said, if there are students present, we wear masks. Otherwise, if we're vaccinated, we don't have to. So again, that may change by September. So that's where we are with meetings in public.
And I think they're going to put new updated guidance out this week for schools as well.
Yep.
So it'll all change by Friday.
Okay.
I think so.
I wonder about the requirement to wear masks if children are present. Do you think that still applies if the children are over 14 and fully vaccinated?
It does in schools.
So if we
but
have
it may change. It is in effect at this moment, but it may change. And it's 12, isn't it?
12.
Is it 12?
Yeah.
12.
Yeah.
So I hope that we'll have student board members by the autumn. That would be a nice thing. So
That's on our supplementary agenda.
Yeah.
If we get to it.
Yeah,
Talk about having them on
again,
board.
it may change. I fully expect it will change, assuming that we continue in the way we are as a as a community, right? If it's low and if they're seeing that the vaccination continues to be effective against the variant and so on.
Do you have any insight as to how custodial staff are feeling with the changes or anything about what's been coming down?
I haven't heard anything custodial staff about concerns.
We haven't had any, anything from our unions regarding, other than saying, you know, if the state, if we go backwards, then we'll want to sit and talk about impact. But for right now, we're coming back face to face. We have no memos in place with our unions, so nobody's voiced any concern at this point.
Okay. I guess my perspective would be, I like the idea of the live stream with the opportunity for people to add and comment prior, and us meeting in person until we can get the audio and all that stuff put in September. I would ask that we just talk to the custodial staff and just ensure that they're comfortable with opening doors to public at this point in time versus a different timeline or something, like if they would just prefer we wait till August or something. And I don't know if they would have any thoughts about it or what those thoughts would be, but I think it would just be courteous to ask and just
I think that's a great point.
talk to them.
I want to note that we're not making decisions here. We're discussing things to vote on at a business meeting.
Yeah.
So
Right,
that's-
so I could
yeah.
certainly get input between now and your business meeting
Yeah,
next month.
that would be great.
But it sounds like we have something that we can do for business meetings at least. Because that's just.
Definitely.
Yeah, because that's just public comment. That's a 3-minute statement.
Right,
Right,
at the
yeah.
comment time, and people can, you know, write in ahead of time, or even during the meeting.
Yeah.
We can give them an opportunity. You know, again, I think the live streaming is much easier than everybody on a Zoom.
Sure seems
Tonight,
like it,
you're
yeah.
gonna Zoom,
Yeah.
because that's what we said we would do, and so people can tune in. But I think, and Ian, feel free to chime in, Ian's in the
Yeah.
room. But I think you can all be here if you're muted. You don't have to be in separate rooms, as long as we stay muted and you just, whoever's speaking, unmutes.
And we can, because we'll be able to see each other raising a hand to say something.
Right,
Yeah.
True.
right.
One question that I did just think of is, what happens if unvaccinated people want to attend in person?
They have to wear a mask
They
and
have
be
to.
socially separated.
Okay.
So again, you can have an unvaccinated room
Mhm.
where people have to be socially separated.
Okay.
And if they want to come in and make a comment, they would be wearing their mask
Yeah.
to protect themselves.
And us.
Yeah.
Is there any guidance about whether or not we are required to ask for vaccination status?
I would have to get more detail. Again, I haven't explored it simply because.
It's been hypothetical.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right,
I do-
and they're gonna give us more guidance this week, as you
Right.
said, so.
Right.
Yeah.
I do really hear the recurring request for people to be able to make comment in their own voice.
Mhm.
So I look
Mhm.
forward to the time when we have the technology in place for that to be possible within these guidelines.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah, you know, again, if we gave people the opportunity to attend remotely and be able to make comment remotely, we can be in person.
Yeah.
And so with this new equipment for live streaming, I think it makes it more possible. It's still not the ideal, but.
Right.
And we'll have to get some feedback from those of you listening at home to make sure that we're all audible also.
Good point.
Well, yeah, and that's,
Until September when we have the new equipment.
right, that's the whole, it is audible. Is it,
Intelligible.
yeah. And again, you know, we've live streamed ball
Right,
games and
right.
stuff, right? And you've seen those.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Okay, so it sounds like that we all want to get us all in person as soon as we can. And it's just a few questions and hearing what the added guidance is on Friday that you
Yeah.
brought up.
Yes.
Okay. Anything else we want to talk about on that?
That feels good.
And I'm not trying to rush us through anything. I also want to get the chance to actually just sit down and talk about what we think on all of these issues. So
We also might consider, if there is time, just doing a social sort of, you know.
Yeah. Well, yeah,
How have you been?
I
Yeah, how
definitely.
have you been, and, you know, tell us about yourself,
Touchy-feely crap.
and, you know, do a little
Okay,
icebreaker.
I did jump straight in.
That one going.
Yeah.
I did jump straight in.
You know, it's
So
a
gonna
board
ask Marty about her
retreat.
shiny new mule.
Yes.
He
Well,
is
I hope
very
he's not
shiny.
shiny too much.
He's
Oh, no,
pretty
he's
shiny.
very shiny.
Is, yeah.
Oh, right, because the coat's actually.
Yeah, his coat is actually very shiny.
Okay, that's cool. I was picturing like a chromed mule.
Oh,
I'm
no,
like, ooh, that'd be dangerous.
Nice, maybe
So-
as an ornament?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a retreat, it's
Yeah.
the board's meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's,
Yeah.
you get to talk about it, anything.
I just want to say how lovely it is to actually be in person with you.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I want that with our community too, but just after all these connections through Zoom, it's really fun to be in room with you.
Yes, I agree. It's nice to actually like be able to go and have someone go, oh, yeah,
Yes, oh my gosh.
And you all have feet?
yes.
Yes!
And we're actually wearing appropriate pants.
I was gonna say we're wearing pants. It's a whole thing.
Yep.
So the next big thing is superintendent goals. And
If there's a folder in front of you.
yes,
And there are, two folks had some input into goals. The last time we met, you remember Andrea, we asked Andrea to say, you know, can you draft them? And she did. And then they came in and it was a style issue, not content.
Yes.
Just
Yeah.
of how are we gonna
How do we-
measure this and how do you make it sort of colloquial enough that, you know, it's understood by all and not.
Well,
Just
and
people
also
with policy.
high enough, right?
Yeah.
So that it can
Mhm.
have meaning trickling all the way down.
yeah, yeah,
Right?
yeah.
Right.
Bringing it up to the, yeah.
Yep.
Highest possible. So we've got 3 draft goals and a measurement for each of them. Since you put these together, you wanna?
Sure. Yeah, and just to be totally transparent, like I think Brooke and Joe, you both know that I'm not tied to these in any
Yeah.
shape or form. So do not, you don't have to sandwich my feedback or anything like that. I'm
Yeah.
not that type of a person.
Yeah.
But what
Well,
I,
and all, this is also all based on what we've discussed.
yes.
Right.
Yeah, so what I took away for the goals that we were focusing in on was, it might be in my other planner because I have since turned over. But basically, one around restorative conversations, continuing that work of restorative justice, but then also looking at just a call from the community and a recognition of need that we have some repairing to do. The second one was looking at what is the feedback we are getting from our data. So we have throughout, you know, the last year had conversations around why is enrollment decreasing, where are students going. I know that prior to this year, those were questions that I would ask and say, like, where are they going, where are they coming from? And so focusing in on that. And then the other piece that we really looked at was looking at continuing the equity work, but having the equity work embedded throughout all 3 goals, and then having a focus on transformational leadership, open and transparent communication, and continuing that work that we established last year. So this is kind of what I just threw out there. And I looked at kind of what makes sense in my mind about what data sources to pull. And the intention with it is not necessarily that those data sources need to be embedded into the goal, but that it's clear enough that Joe knows what questions we're gonna be asking, so that when she's meeting with her leadership cabinet, she can be directing them towards these measurements. So the first one, restorative conversations. Dr. Moshe will lead the district in engaging and facilitating restorative conversations with students, staff, families, and community members, leading to an area of understanding on where to focus district resources. And really using our district surveys to kind of inform what does progress mean towards that. The second one, learning growth for all students. Dr. Moshe will lead the district in prioritizing training and implementation of teaching practices that support the needs of all students by focusing on best practices that support oh, that's repetitive, the needs of all students in their least restrictive environment. Least restrictive environment is a SPED term. It basically just means like as much with their general education peers as they can possibly be. Things I was thinking about in terms of what I would look at to collect that data is OSPI collected data such as graduation rates, SBA scores, but not just looking at the district collectively, but to really drill down to what are subsects scores doing. And that really leans into the work we talked about with Dr. Campbell. That's kind of what she would be doing. LRE percentage for special education students, that ties into a grant that's already occurring at the elementary level with the inclusionary practices grant.
LRE stands for?
Least restrictive environment.
Thank you.
And the reason why that's important is special education students receive their basic ed fund, but then they also receive additional funding because they require more supports as a special ed student. And how much funding they receive is driven by that percentage, and it's actually encouraging inclusion. So the more our special education students are placed in general education settings, actually the more money we receive for them.
Could I make a comment on that?
Go for it.
Something you may notice in the budget is that if you look at there's general apportionment, and in the basic education, a percentage of that is drawn off for special education based upon this.
Yeah.
And because we have done a really good job, and I find this fascinating, of creating the least restricted environment, our percentage has gone down from 27% to like 16% of the time in special ed combined.
Yeah.
More money is funneled back into basic ed and less into special ed.
Yep.
So it's one of the questions you may have as we move through that budget thing is, why is that working? Well, it's this.
Okay.
Because we do have, matter of fact, USPI called, we had like the highest rate in the state. Like, how do you get there?
Excellent.
And
No,
it's
that's
our
not
four period
excellent.
day.
No, that's not good.
That's not good.
No, highest percentage in more restrictive.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah. Oh,
so
that's not
opposite,
good.
not good.
Not
Yeah,
good.
so it's something you'll notice as we go through things.
Yeah, and part of that was because of the 4-period
Right.
day.
Right.
We would have students in classes 3 periods a day, and then in support services 1 period a day, so it became 25%,
Yeah.
which is more than the
Yeah.
20% they recommend.
So
Got it.
We
your,
worked that out.
your LRE boxes are 80 to 100%, and that's where like typically if you think about a student who's receiving like resource level supports, they're 80 to 100. Then you have 79% to 40% is the next box. And then it would be 39 to 0%, and that's like your most restrictive.
Right.
And South Whidbey was disproportionately on the most. Yep.
Got it.
Gotcha.
Yeah, because, yeah.
And in a district this size, do we see more fluctuation in those numbers than we would with a larger student body?
We
From
don't
year to year?
see more fluctuation in the number of students being served. It's consistently about 190 or so. But we have seen, and it's a relatively new process where they divided it up.
Mhm.
But we have seen, this year, especially going into 21-22, a dramatic change
Mhm.
because of that.
Got it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other thing that you'll see that is impacted by that is as enrollment decreases, if it is primarily general education students who leave, then the special education percentage, even though the number hasn't gone up, the percentage increases. And that can be problematic. And there's a lot of reasons why that may occur. You know, private schools are not necessarily required to honor the IEP. Parents who send their kids to private schools can still receive special education services from the district, and the district has to provide those services for those students. But then they fall on our percentage, not on the private school. So there's just a lot of things that.
And what that means from a financial standpoint is we are limited with a cap on what percentage you can get funded in special education. And so if they're funding, say, 13%, and we're at 16%, and we're not being funded for 3%.
Yeah.
Right, so there's kids that receive no funding whatsoever, even though we have provided service.
Yeah, and most districts, so the funding models.
Well, and to be clear, there are students for whom the district does not
Yeah.
receive funding.
Correct.
Yes.
That we serve.
Yes.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Yes.
Then we have to find funding from other places.
Right.
Yes, So the cap is 13.5%, but from my knowledge, I don't know a single district that's actually at or under 13.5. Right, everybody's over, because it's an algorithm that says only 13.5% of your kids should
Well, it
have.
used to be 12.
Yeah,
Upped
and then
it,
they upped
so.
it.
And the great thing about this second goal, a great thing about this second goal, in my opinion, is that these best practices are really supportive of all students.
Mhm.
And so addressing the needs of students in our special education program is just one of the many benefits of
Yep.
focusing on this training and implementation approach.
Yeah.
And we do have a grant in place for inclusionary practices,
Yeah.
which is a bigger practice, right, than just, as you say, working with students with special needs. And the universally designed instruction is a huge piece of that, which we also talked about when we talked about this goal, was how do we
Right.
move that across the district, so.
Things like project-based learning would fit as best practices to be trained and implemented, and this goal might need to not be as precise as to name those practices, but rather to leave some creativity in the district to discover and implement.
Well, it also opens it up for outdoor ed. It opens it up for what the middle school was doing with the community center. Like all of those things and all of those supports and things that we have in the district. fall
ALE
into
too.
Mhm.
Yeah, ALE as well.
Yeah, the measurement, it probably will be broader than that,
Yeah.
than what we've listed,
Oh, yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because yes,
Well, and survey data is gonna play into that too, because we've got
Right.
questions about.
but it also is
How
gonna,
we make
it's gonna start with the August 11th meeting with
Okay.
Dr. Campbell
Yeah.
to
Yep.
say,
Sure.
okay, what does your data look like in these demographic areas, and exploring that, and
Yeah.
then moving on to, okay, how can we impact that data?
Yeah, it's gonna build some priorities for us.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then for those who can't see our sheet, the other areas were the ELPA scores, which is for our students with English learning, highly capable identification, looking at is our identification representative of our student population, and disproportionality across just different areas within that. And then goal number 3, Dr.
I just want
Go for
to step back. The disproportionality here says in special education. Do you think we should change that to disproportionality in any area of our demographics?
Yeah.
Yeah.
In non-gen ed programs, or I don't know how to phrase that.
Well, it could be, disproportionality in.
I'm thinking AP classes.
Yeah,
Our
absolutely.
equity policy
Yeah.
Right,
called out a
but-
lot of the disproportionality
Right,
decisions.
right? So is it in students of color of a particular demographic area? Is
Male,
it
female.
gender?
Yeah, for sure.
Exactly. So,
Yeah.
so it
Maybe just
So
student-
broad.
just
that.
disproportionality.
Disproportionality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
I'm also thinking a little bit about wordsmithing, but I'm wondering if
Please do.
we should
Yeah,
say,
good.
I'm just wondering, in order to make this first sentence a little less redundant, we might say, Dr. Moshe will lead the district in prioritizing training and implementation of supportive teaching practices by focusing on best practices that serve the needs of all students
Sweet.
in their least restrictive environment.
Do it.
Can you say it again?
Dr. Moshe will lead the district in prioritizing training and implementation of supportive teaching practices by focusing on best practices that serve the needs of all students in their least restrictive environment. And I feel we might be able to make it a little punchier by describing the teaching practices with a word more descriptive than supportive.
I think the other part I will be totally transparent about, coming from SPED world, SPED is always focused on deficits, and so there's probably other words than least restrictive environment.
Yeah.
How
that
about
are
best?
Best
probably-
possible. Let's not look at what we're trying to, the low points that we're trying to fix. Let's look at finding the highest achievement for each of these students.
Yeah, yeah,
What if it were implementation of best practices, not just teaching?
okay.
Mm-hmm.
instead of saying it again. So lead the district in prioritizing and training of best practices
That support the needs of all students in their most nurturing.
Of all students, do we need that last phrase?
I'd like to get the specific, in their best possible learning environment.
What if we use something along there, if we go back to the vision, Joe, there's about the end about the future that they may choose. What is the?
In the learning environment best suited for their personal goals?
Or it's,
You mean our vision?
Yeah.
Where they're gonna be an active member of the global society that, is that what you're,
yeah, but there's the part about a future of their choosing at the end.
that's in the mission.
Okay.
Oh, the mission?
Mm.
Okay.
Yeah.
But maybe adding that mission language in there
Yeah.
instead.
Yeah.
That's a nice idea.
My goal is, so on the next meeting, hopefully you're gonna put these on the agenda for approval, which is why I'm kinda hoping we wordsmith it to that point.
Mhm.
Yes. Since we're diving into wordsmithing goal 2, do we want to also wordsmith goal 1 before we move to goal 3?
Yeah, I think that'd
Okay.
be good if we have any.
I wanted to put an "and" in between "in" and "facilitating."
Okay.
Engaging in and facilitating.
Yeah.
And I put in focusing on district resources to kind of give a measure point, but I don't know that that's the right measure point.
If we consider the time and expertise of district employees as resources, then I think that's one of the most empowering phrases we could use.
I'm also thinking, my hope is that these conversations tell us what we don't know, right? And so I can't say that it's gonna result in professional development on this topic or something like that, because
Right.
I don't, the point is to have a conversation to learn something that we don't know.
This is a fact-finding mission. It's-
Yeah,
Mhm.
So then is one of the measurements action on areas that we don't know that we need to work on?
yeah,
I mean,
but we have no idea.
but, I mean, it would be phrased as action on areas of
Well, this-
concern thus far unknown to
It
us.
feels like this is
Yeah.
discovery,
Yeah.
yeah, and then action so that we can take action in future, like.
Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe one of the measurements is identification of new action areas.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
there we go.
So, the vision, mission, goals that we currently have. The vision that, or the mission that I think you're referring to is that every student will be supported to be a resilient, innovative, compassionate, and productive graduate, prepared for a diverse and dynamic world.
Yes.
Now, the school district learning goals, are we replacing them, or are these superintendent goals?
These are superintendent.
They are superintendent goals, but I would hope we would have them resonate what we're also.
Right, so our schools will be welcoming, safe, and supportive places with consistent school-wide expectations where all are respected. Our students will demonstrate growth towards mastery in all content areas. Our students will graduate ready for a future they choose.
That was it.
That's the one.
That
That's
was
the
the
one
one.
part.
So I was thinking that support the future that they choose instead of least restrictive environment, or something along that echoes that.
How
So-
about, sorry, how about, Dr. Moshe will lead the district in prioritizing training and implementation of best practices that support the needs of all students in the learning environments that best nurture students' success in the futures they choose.
There.
I was going a little shorter than that, but
Yeah,
yours
I'd
might
like
be
it to be
better.
shorter.
That's the right
So it-
vibe, though.
Yeah, it's
Yes.
exactly the same until the needs of all students in achieving the future they choose. Just straightforward.
Just Say that again?
So it's, Dr. Moshe will lead the district in prioritizing training and implementation of best practices that support the needs of all students in achieving a future they choose.
That feels
It's just
Clear.
It cuts to it.
It doesn't
Much
point to
nicer
learning
than-
environments though,
Right.
and I wonder if we want to point to learning environments because of the possibility of coming around
How about
on a
best
positive-
practices that create?
Ooh, that's a
Learning
good one.
environment.
learning environments to support students'
That
success in the
support.
futures they choose.
That support,
That support student
Yeah.
success in the futures they choose.
that's much better than least restrictive environment.
It resonates with more people,
You got it.
for sure.
Explain it every time you say it.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to.
Dr.
I'm gonna
Moshe will
see
lead
it
the
before.
district in prioritizing training and implementation of best practices that create learning environments supportive of the needs. How about that?
How about supportive of student success in the futures they choose? Supportive of every student's success in the futures they choose.
Sure.
Future singular they choose.
I think that works.
Apostrophe S on students?
Every student, apostrophe S, yes.
Yeah.
Single student's possessive.
Every student's
Success in the future they choose. It's a lot easier to wordsmith when we're all at our own computer typing.
Yeah.
Well,
Well, and I don't do well trying
Dr.
to.
Moshe will lead the district in prioritizing training and implementation of best practices that create learning environments supportive of every student's success in the future they choose.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I like that.
Okay. Let me go back to goal 1. Dr. Moshe will lead the district in engaging and facilitating?
Engaging in.
In
facilitating.
and facilitating restorative conversations with students, staff, families, and community members, leading to an understanding of areas on which to focus district resources.
We were gonna, areas on which to take for future action?
I was thinking the measurement was gonna be
Yeah.
feedback from district surveys, comma, identification of new action areas.
Yeah.
That was it, it was,
Yeah.
leading to leading to identification of new action areas.
So do we want that in the goal itself,
I
or do we
think
want
so.
that in the measurement? And
I
then how we're
think-
gonna measure? No, that feels like the goal, sorry. And then the measurement.
So I guess the goal is to identify new action areas and the measurement is did we act?
Yeah,
Yeah.
is where.
What were the outcomes?
Or do we have the outcomes so that we know how to act?
Right.
Where to act, yeah.
Yeah,
So the goal is leading to an understanding of areas on which to focus district resources and identification of new action areas.
I think it's just leading to identification of new action areas.
Sure,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
much cleaner.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Dr. March will lead the district in engaging in and facilitating restorative conversations with students, staff, families, and community members, leading to identification of new action areas.
Oof, yeah, that's good.
Or new and
That feels nice.
reinvigorated action areas.
Yeah.
I wonder, like, we might
Just keep it
identify
simple.
some action areas that we've already,
New or
Noticed?
continuing?
yeah, new and continuing action areas.
New and continuing.
Sure.
Action areas, okay. And then for measurement, feedback from district surveys?
I mean, I think that's,
I think it would also be just the restorative conversations themselves.
Feedback from the conversations
From
themselves.
district conversations,
Mhm.
Really,
surveys.
The same measurement as on number 3, information gained during restorative conversations and district surveys.
There you go.
yeah.
Okay.
So that might, those two goals may have the same measure.
Sure.
Yep.
And I see both of those in our mission and our vision.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we've got goal 1, goal 2.
Okay, so goal 3, as proposed, is Dr. Moshe will participate in and lead the district leadership team in transformational leadership development in efforts to maintain and improve transparent communication and the dismantling of systemic barriers for students and families.
I like that one.
And my thought here, Joe, was, I remember when you started the coffees with the soup
Mhm.
conversation, there was just an understanding that some of the concerns that were coming forward were not necessarily related to you. They were pieces and growth and areas of development that we had across the whole of district leadership. And so what I'm hoping that this will open for you is opportunity to focus on developing those areas that you see within your own team so that the whole team can be stronger.
And we've been talking about restarting those, and maybe with me attending
Mhm.
also,
Yeah.
since I have time during the day while my kid's in kindergarten.
So it could also be, I don't know, I'm thinking logistics, right? We could do a leadership meeting and then have, coffee conversation, and if a second board member wants to join, so that it's not another day
Yeah.
that you're,
Oh, yeah.
Rotating
yeah.
attendance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that we can actually pull the in efforts from that second line. So it would just be transformational leadership development to maintain and improve,
yep.
Cool.
just to market it up, and fewer words is better.
I like the word transparent, and I also wonder if there's another word like effective to describe communication.
The part I struggle with that is any organization you go to, right? Everyone's gonna say there's no communication, right? So how do you measure effectiveness?
Right.
Right.
Well, and I would also challenge that to say that maintain and improve transparent communication. Transparent communication, it includes communication as a whole.
Sure.
Right.
So it's still trying to maintain and improve communication.
Mm-hmm.
It's just adding a modifier in there that.
Yeah. Is transparency our greatest goal with communication? Is that where we see the most room for improvement?
I think it was 2 years ago.
Yeah, yeah, and I think we've improved on that. I think it's just I think effective is actually, I think that we're doing a good job with communication, but I think that we can always do better.
Right.
In making it clear and get what people want to them. And that's so
I think
hard when
it's
people want so many different
multidirectional.
things.
It is.
Can I
Multidirectional
project
communication.
for a little bit?
Mhm.
Is part of what I'm hearing you ask for is two-way communication?
That is
versus
certainly
one
part of
way?
it. I guess when I hear the word transparent, especially in relationship with the district, I think about our communication can be transparent, through a public records request, for instance, but that doesn't necessarily increase its efficiency or its effectiveness
Sure.
or its satisfying the community's expressed need.
So you're speaking to flow of communication.
Yeah, I guess I'm thinking the communication, it can be as transparent as all get out, but if it's still not addressing the community's concerns, then it's not
Yeah.
effective.
If it's
Yeah.
transparent because we're just spamming everything out there,
Right.
which
Right.
we aren't, but.
We're telling you
Yeah.
everything
Yes.
we're doing.
So maybe we just pull transparent with the understanding that improving communications include, maintaining and improving
What if you
communications.
take out
include-
transparent and put
Yeah.
two-way?
But if you were writing this goal focused on flow
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and how communication is flowing, what would you say?
Maybe open communication?
because that covers, that includes both transparent and two-way.
Open feels like an invitation that leads to connection, whereas
Mhm.
transparent feels like
You're not gonna know.
not keeping secrets.
Yeah.
Mm.
So I would suggest
I like that
open
word.
communication.
So what if we think about us building our skill set, right? So we want to maintain the transparency that we've established, that everybody's worked really hard to establish, especially Christy. But we want to then step it up to increasing it to open communication with two-way.
The word open to me invites a feeling of welcome and engagement and reciprocity.
Mm-hmm. Can I push on that for just a little bit?
Yeah.
My worry, if we ask district employees to engage in open communication, is that I don't know that sometimes the communication we receive is kind, courteous, or within our civility clause.
Right.
So I'm open to open communication as a focus if we have some very clear guidance and boundaries around what professional and respectful communication looks and feels like to the people we're asking to engage in those conversations.
That's hard to monitor on a large basis. I'm still thinking of the words flow or loop, or those words that speak to sort of the Mobius strip that communication is. Like,
Yeah.
we all know effective communication means you speak, I listen, then I speak, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But how, what's the right word to offer
Yeah.
that it's a flow, it's a back and forth, rather than we give you fleh
Yeah.
and you accept fleh and we all move on, right?
Well, or I'm really upset that you won't accept it.
Yes.
Well, I'm upset that you won't change what you're doing.
Yes, based on what I just said to you.
Yes, and
Right.
I want to make sure we protect that, because my experience, having had to have some of those conversations where you do listen but you still say no, it's not always well received.
Right.
Correct.
And so this is kind of my,
How about responsive?
Ooh, responsive is a good word.
I do like responsive.
It's Christie's word.
Open doesn't.
Well, and responsive and responsible is the other word that popped in for me. Like responsible communication, like
Well,
Yeah.
responsive
I don't know if that's the right word,
suggests it, but
it
based
does.
up without saying it.
Yeah, transparent and effective, or transparent and responsive would
I like
address my
res-
concern.
I like
So-
responsive.
I like
better.
responsive because it's an action. It's a guide you
I mean,
can
I
use
I
to take
answer an
action.
email, it doesn't mean people
Right.
Like what you
Yeah,
said.
like what I said.
But you
Yeah.
did your work and you followed
word-
the protocols.
Now, for a board, I'm totally open to an open communication goal.
Right.
But I want to also just be mindful that this is our ask of Joe.
Right.
And I
Right.
don't want to put Joe or Dan or John
Well,
or Kayla
right.
So if you,
or Susie.
the
in
board,
class.
set the goals, and I know that's why you're grappling with the words, it gives us the ability to say, here are the goals that are set for the district by the board. This is what we're doing, and this is
Yeah.
why we're doing it. Much like, the feelings that have come up around the work we're doing on equity.
Mhm.
There are some folks who've expressed their concern about that. From my perspective, it's what the board's directed, right? So that
Right.
gives the staff the ability to say, we're doing what the board has asked of us. If the board changes that, then we will change.
For sure.
The part where, the reason I'm pushing on this one so hard is because if we are going to evaluate you based on this goal, I
Mhm.
want to be able to have it written on things that you can control
Right.
and things you can do, and I
Right.
don't want this goal to be based or measured on how people receive your no.
Yep.
Right.
Mhm.
And we don't want open to mean
Agreed.
boundless.
Right.
Yes.
Yes.
And I love the phrase transformational leadership, and I think communication is just one of many aspects of leadership. So honestly,
How are you defining transformational?
I would describe transformational leadership as leadership that changes not just what is done, but how it is done, and where the leaders themselves evolve through engaging in the leadership training or practice.
So
I love that.
what-
I just add why instead of also.
Well, and so what, if this goal is met, what will you see?
I think at the heart of this goal for me is creating a culture where the people in positions of power within this district are experiencing greater wholeness, trust, integrity, resilience, and ability to serve, and that then overflows into the lives of students and families to uplift everyone.
And also that they're sharing that down to those who report to them, so it
Mhm.
filters through the entire school.
When I think of it, I think about what I saw in the shift when the discipline policy changed. And how administrators all of a sudden had light bulb moments and things shifting and changing, and they were trying and doing new and different things because they saw the shift, right? So for me, when I look at that, it's giving you opportunity to look at what are the light bulbs that are gonna happen, what is gonna shift and change from this work, and how do you kind of trickle that inspiration down to the student level? And then what happens as a
So-
result?
The communication piece seems misplaced.
Yeah,
I think that's at the heart of my discomfort. It feels like transformational leadership includes communication with all these qualities we've just discussed, but it feels out of balance to have them equally named in the title and text of the goal.
So then the goal would be to lead the leadership team in transformational leadership development in order to dismantle systemic barriers for students and families.
so then
With the idea then being that we would measure it on efforts made.
It would be
new
measured on
programs,
student
and student
improvement.
Student improvement,
Right,
yeah.
and student improvement
Sure.
in those demographic areas where we see
The-
Right.
the-
Yeah.
difference.
Yes.
What if we put communication up in goal number 1?
I like that better. It
Yeah.
feels like a better fit.
Yep. So
Mhm.
it's-
And with goal number 3, I'd also suggest, in addition to dismantling systemic barriers for students and families, we might want to put a positive outcome like creating a culture of thriving for all. or
What about
something.
the mission?
Well, and again, I push back a little bit. We have control over the students in our care. The families piece that's out of our purview,
Right.
so,
So dismantling systemic barriers would be success in and of itself.
yeah, and it would be for students.
For
Right.
students.
Right.
When I put families in there, I was thinking about their engagement in our system,
Right.
not necessarily them personally.
Yeah,
Sure.
when we have communication in there, it's more
Yeah.
important, but when we don't.
When we pull out the
really
communication
focus.
piece, we're talking about students, we're talking about their
Yeah.
voices and their
Yeah.
improvement
Yeah,
over time because we have this system of trust that we're building.
yes.
So it would
Okay.
be to dismantle, take out, maintain, and improve the,
Right.
Yeah, so just be,
Yes.
Dr. Moshe will participate in and lead the leadership team in
Yes.
transformational leadership development to dismantle the system,
Yes,
to dismantle systemic barriers
Yeah.
for students.
because that's a specific goal under our,
Yeah.
Anti-racism goals, like that's a
Yeah.
very
I like
clear,
that.
this is a next step.
Yeah,
And then with number 1, we add, Dr. Moshe will lead the district in engaging in and facilitating restorative conversations and responsive communication with students, staff, families, and community members, leading to identification of new action areas, new and continuing action areas.
Are we approaching a place where that needs to be 2 sentences? Because that's a lot sandwiched in one thought.
Well, let me challenge that a little and say that restorative conversations includes all communication that you have.
yeah. What if it was
That's true.
leading to identifying new action areas and responsive communication?
Do we feel the need to include responsive communication in goal 1?
That's what I was pushing back on, is I don't think, I think that
So we
that's
just
part
start
of
yeah.
the conversations.
Sure,
Yeah.
because again, conversation, that word gives us the ebb and flow of a communication loop.
Communication.
Right.
If we have restorative conversations, we're having responsive communication.
Yeah.
That is correct.
I wonder if we need to somehow suggest that a conversation is through any medium, including, district newsletters and emails and meetings and such.
So I'd say those would be
Getting-
strategies.
Or
Or,
that's getting into the nitty gritty.
yeah, or communications become measurements.
True.
To keep it at the high level of a goal,
Yeah.
leaving responsive communication out
Yeah.
works for me.
Okay.
so again, let me see if I have this. Dr. Moshe will lead the district in engaging in. Lead the district
In engaging in.
We could
Okay.
say in engaging with.
and facilitating.
I want to make
Awkward.
sure that it's clear to the community that the district recognizes we need to be part of the conversation,
Yeah.
not just leading it.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so,
So I agree, too many ins.
but I think that
Lead
it's
the
important.
district in engaging
Yeah.
and
How about
facilitating. I just don't think we
May
need
I?
this. Yes.
Dr. Moshe will lead the district's engagement
Ooh,
in and facilitation of restorative conversations with students. engagement with and facilitation of.
Will lead the district's engagement in and facilitation of restorative conversations with. Okay. That gets rid of one of the ends, which is great,
Yes.
while keeping the important one.
Yes.
District's engagement and facilitation.
Engagement with,
Engagement in.
I'm sorry, engagement in and
And
facilitation
facilitation.
of.
Restorative conversations with students, staff,
Hey, we both talk at the
families, and
same
community
time.
members leading to identification of
It's
new
not
and continuing
ridiculous.
action areas. Yes, got that?
Yeah.
Okay. And then goal 2, will lead the district in prioritizing training and implementation of best practices that create learning environments supportive of every student's success in the future they choose.
Nice.
Dr. Moshe will participate in and lead the district leadership team in transformational leadership development to dismantle systemic barriers for students.
Okay.
I like it.
Okay.
Yes.
And I think that's important. These three combine to talk about our community,
Mm-hmm.
talk about how we connect with that community,
Mm-hmm.
how we prioritize learning and
Mhm.
equity of learning, and work towards bettering how we serve our students as a district. Like, I think that three goals are spreading out to cover a lot of area.
So-
Joe, how do you feel about these
Yeah, I was just
goals?
gonna ask, like, we just had a very philosophical discussion.
For me, right, as the one being measured, I now want to go to, how are you going to know if I've done it?
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I think
Right?
that's
So
important. when
the
we have
first
a
part,
vision.
of course, is
Yeah.
the,
Yeah.
what are the goals? And then it's going to be, what's going to be the,
That actually segues very nicely into the next thing on the list, which is
Right.
our rubric for
evaluation.
evaluation.
So, again, in your packet is a copy of the latest from the framework
And I went through and picked up.
and
picked a
the
bunch.
evaluation actual document that would go with it. And I apologize ahead of time for the stapling, because I had it done auto and I flipped on the wrong side, so it's all there. but-
Happens to the best of
So,
us.
last year, we had 15 points, lettered
Yeah.
points. I have 15 here that I went through and looked at, that I think would be a good place to start conversation. But that just as a rough draft to start on.
Yeah, what I would look for from the board is, okay, you've got the goals, how do they fit this, so I know what the rubric is for
Exactly.
measurement.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then that can inform what we write on the measurement part of the goals.
Right.
Yeah.
So standard 1, strand 1, C and D were important here, which is holds board and staff mutually accountable for striving towards the vision and uses the vision as an indicator of progress. So that's looking at the vision of the district and also the goals that we provide. And so it's talking about the transformational leadership in large part. And then standard 2, strand 1, A, C, D, and E. I'll read those for those following along. I don't see E on here.
There's no E on this.
There's no
copy.
E.
Did I,
This might be the old
this is the newest, this is
Oh.
from 218.
218, okay, then I was looking at the wrong one. I tried to find the most recent and did not. So we can look at this now and see which ones it was. Yeah, A is still the same. Okay, D became D, so this is, yeah, there's different, oh, I'm looking at the wrong spot.
So, Joe,
Yeah.
one thing I'm doing is I'm just going through and I'm putting the numbers as I would see them show up
Oh,
in the
yeah.
rubric.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
for goals 1, 2,
Yeah.
and 3.
Uh-huh. And maybe that might be helpful.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
love the idea of having a map.
Yes.
gonna take a moment to read this and get familiar with what version we're looking at.
Yes.
And then my thought is that, Joe, that might give you some areas that you know you can like round into, right? Because for those listening into our meeting, what they don't know is that you will frequently throughout the year will give the board updates of things that you've been doing and how they tie
Yeah,
up.
and that's, we're gonna talk about the timeline.
Yeah.
That's on the agenda, so.
Some of these are brand new to what I was looking at. Fascinating.
Okay.
Are you guys comfortable temperature-wise?
I'm
It's kind of-
cold.
It's a little on the cool side.
I mean, it's keeping me nice and awake and alert, but
Right.
it's
Yeah.
still a little chilly. Good call.
So, Brooke, when we do this, knowing first year is always comprehensive for the evaluation, is there a focus component that comes after this? Or
No,
it
this
all-
is actually part of the focused cycle. We're
Yeah.
not doing comprehensive.
No, that's
Okay.
another.
It's a 6-year cycle. It's 2 more years out.
So you would focus on all standards or all strands, or would we choose what
No, you-
standards and strands?
In 2 years, we focus on all of them.
Yeah, this year I would suggest that you do what we would do for teachers, is you pick 3 areas.
Okay,
Well, and we had 15 letters across,
Yeah, but
like,
you,
a bunch of them.
it was
Yeah.
still 3 strands, so
Oh,
I
it was
would go
just-
with 3 strands, my
strands.
suggestion.
okay.
Or, you know, again, fewer,
Yeah, if there's anything
Yeah.
that specifically speaks to something really powerfully, I have no
Right.
problem cherry picking one letter out of a different
Mhm.
strand.
Right.
but-
So,
Exactly.
when I went through and looked at areas, so just to kind of show my thinking, right? I went through this piece and I just put the goal number on if I saw, and then I checked it against the rubric to see if it was in fact what I intended it to be. So the strands for me, Joe, for me, which I'm open to other people actually having time to catch up to my brain, is
Your brain is a marvel.
standard 2, strand 1. I saw a lot of goal 2 and 1.
Yes.
Standard 2, strand 2, I saw 2 and 3. But the one that had 1, 2, and 3 pretty consistently throughout was standard.
I would suggest, based on what I'm seeing, just this and this,
They don't match up.
they don't match right now.
Okay,
And I didn't recognize
Yeah.
that. So I would go with this in
Yeah.
2018.
that
Because
over there.
WASDA has
Yeah.
provided a bunch of different
Yes.
documents.
Yeah.
Because there is no strands anymore, it's just standards.
Okay, so then
Yeah.
standard 4 would be the one that I see it coming, all 3 goals coming to clear us through.
Standard for
the community of care and support for
your
students.
students.
Yeah. So like in A, I saw 1, 2, and 3.
That would be
And
develops and implements procedures,
Mhm.
yeah.
In B, I saw 1 and 2.
So you're saying standard 4 kind of meets all 3 goals?
That's what I'm seeing.
Okay. Can go that way too. It's clearly the board's call. I mean, standard 1 is all about vision.
Yeah, standard
Mhm.
one,
Mhm.
It seems like you have to do standard 1.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I see a lot of 2 and 3 in standard 1.
yeah.
I do too.
Particularly in C,
Mhm.
C being,
And I see a lot of 1 and 3 in standard 2.
yeah, so 1, 2, 3, yeah.
And I see a lot of 1 and 2 in standard 3.
Mhm.
Well, yes,
Yeah.
that's why.
Yes. Correct.
That's why you need to
Yeah,
kind of
so
pick
you-
3 standards
Right.
and then
Mhm.
you'll get a little bit of all of it.
Because standard 6 has a lot of goal 1 in there.
That's what I thought too, yeah.
There's still a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
I think from our community, where they're asking for more information about goal 2.
I agree with you on that.
On goal 2 or on standard 2?
Just the information around goal 2.
Okay.
So I think that one of the standards we pick should highlight the second goal.
Yeah. Standard 3 seems to be really attuned to the questions we're hearing about student academic performance.
Mhm.
And if it's 2 and 3, very.
I think if it's 2, yeah, specifically well, because it's that academic focus of, each student having choices after they graduate.
And standard 4 really addresses the express need to improve our school culture around trust with community and,
Standard 2 is all about equity.
yeah.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
again,
Really.
Yeah,
figure out
so
the
how do we
priorities.
want to prioritize?
So let's actually go through these one at a time, and just talk about which goals that they really back up, now that I'm actually taking notes. And then we can look at each one and see which one hits, how we can get the best spread across the various standards.
Yeah.
So standard 1, we thought worked very much on 3, but also hit some of 2.
Yep.
Standard 2 probably hit 1 and 2 with a little bit of 3, or 1 and 3 with
I
a little
had
2.
primarily 1 with a little bit of 3 and a little bit of 2.
Yeah.
I would agree.
Mhm.
Okay. Standard 3.
Solid 2.
Yep. Standard-
And touches on 3.
Yeah.
Touches on 1 as well in standard 3, note C.
I think that's more 2 to me.
Well,
Standard 3.
To, I guess, motivating members of school community is
Mhm.
different
Yeah.
than communicating with members of school
Yeah.
community.
But I think if we're transforming, we're motivating.
Right,
Mhm.
And I see, and then
Yeah.
like motivating
Oh, looking at verse.
right.
Yeah.
stakeholders in A speaks to 1 for me.
Yeah.
Okay.
Standard 4 really touches on all 3.
So standard 4.
Feels like
I think that's next, yeah.
Looks really good. It's Marion berries.
Oh.
Don't forget to have some, since we're clearly just gonna power through. I'm leading by example, Hudson High.
I'm
We're
glad,
not
because I was self-conscious
Well
that I was
done.
the only one.
Now,
who
which
did
goal
that.
are you meeting in this particular,
No,
like,
that's
time
My
meeting?
particular goal is leadership. This is
Perfect,
leadership.
I love it, I love it.
Transforming wastelands.
Yeah, exactly. I've been doing that all COVID.
Standard 4 really feels like it hits 3 most strongly to me.
Mhm.
This feels to me more about safety rather than,
So when I look at these, I look at the distinguished
oh,
column.
yeah.
Mhm.
So if we look at this done at a distinguished level, you have data-based evaluations of effectiveness. You have data-based evaluations to look at, kind of just the culture and climate, right? So
Mhm.
culture and climate is typically measured by safety and
Yeah.
Mhm.
do our students safe. You have parent, teacher, student, administrative involvement in that data. And then collaboration, so that would be the transformational piece of them leading the district efforts and then elevating to a climate to where employees are highly conscious.
Yeah.
So we're saying 2 and 3 with someone,
I,
or is it all
Well,
3?
I see all 3 here, and I see, helping students understand, articulate, and act on their learning needs and participate in decision-making. That really is a learning environment that nurtures student success, so that's a solid 2.
it's also the future they're choosing.
Mhm.
All of them.
Yeah.
Standard. This is a whole lot of 3.
A whole lot of 3.
Mhm.
Yep.
Transformation into effective educational leaders.
Yeah, this is almost exclusively 3. I mean, there's some 2 in there, but not as much.
2 is the measurement of did you do 3.
Yeah.
And then standard 6 is really number 1.
Really solid 1.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is whole bunches of 1. Standard 7.
I don't see any of our goals as we've intended them in standard 7.
There's a little bit of opportunity for transformational leadership
Yes.
through recruiting, hiring practices, just because that's such a
Mhm.
potent point in I
Yeah.
don't know, how we recruit is such a deeply impactful aspect of school culture.
Yeah,
Sure.
so there's a little bit of 3,
Little
but
bit
not
of
as
3.
much.
But I also see that in standard 4, when you're talking about
Yeah.
high expectations for professional behavior of district employees. So that implies you're hiring the right people
Sure.
for the
So-
job.
So that suggests to me that standard 7 doesn't meet
Doesn't
our
really-
particular
Probably
goals
not
for
as
this
much
year.
of a focus.
Standard 8 is really focused in on the relationship with us,
Mhm.
and I could see elements of 1 and 3,
Mhm.
but it is limited to us.
So, what I have here is standard 1 hits 3 and does sum 2. Standard 2 hits 1, does sum 3, sum 2. Standard 3 hits 2, does sum 3, sum 1. Standard 4 hits all of them. Standard 5 hits 3, standard 6 hits 1. Standard 8 hits sum 1, sum 3, so that sounds like 7 and 8 both aren't
So,
what we're looking for here.
Question,
Yeah.
could we project your notes up there, so we could all see them?
Or I can just write it.
Or, yeah, or write
Do you have
it.
a-
And then Joe, I would love,
Do you have any pens here though?
Oh.
These pens.
We have dry erase markers,
Maybe in a drawer.
Christine.
Why don't we take a couple minutes
Yeah,
break?
Yeah, to
Get a
get
snack,
pie.
and we'll get this turned off.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Or, yeah, I can just, I'm fine just drawing it, because then I can actually put I can make a,
here you go.
oh, here's more of that.
But these are, yeah, these are specific to this.
Oh, this is just, this, or-
I think so. Yeah.
yeah.
Meeting.
Oh, here, let's try this
Just a
one.
minute, it's at my height right here. Turn that on.
Oh, this'll work.
Will it come off?
Yes.
Okay.
This is in the black one.
This one is trash.
Oh, it's trash.
And this one is great.
There we go. See if we get you.
No real arrangement?
Sorry.
Blood brown here. Right there.
That's a clipboard. Lots
Lots
of
of clipboards, yeah.
There's usually a box up there.
We may have thrown them away.
Two, one.
Good opportunity to text the kids and remind them they're on animal dinner duty tonight.
Yes. It's funny because when we came in, I'm like, gosh, she's so much taller than I thought.
That's what I thought when I met Damien. I was like, oh, I just didn't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So funny.
So it's really strange when there are folks I've gotten to know over a whole year now, and I'm only meeting some of them in person for the first time.
Yeah, exactly.
Very strange.
Okay. There we go.
Would you like a coffee?
Yeah, it's delicious. Thanks. It's really great that you brought out milk. I appreciate that so much.
Yeah.
Thank you. I could drop another cup.
No, the coffee's actually from Hawaii.
Oh.
Very nice.
Is it a particular variety that you like?
It's Roy's. And so there's one restaurants.
The roots are in Hawaii, correct?
Oh, no, no. It's like he's going back.
How are they doing?
They're doing good. I did it. I just chocolates. But yeah, it's so hard by the I was just like, so you just can't see your friends.
What's that?
It'd be so easy.
Oh, I will.
Yeah, is the COVID restriction on travel still in place?
Yeah,
It's been really
they just stopped requiring a test. So we had a test going on, so we went on the second.
It's a wild trail time.
I bet it is. We went. It's not for me.
Who knew I would ever?
Basically, full mask.
Wild trail.
I don't know. That's true.
They did require quarantine.
Paint's drying.
Missed opportunity there.
It's drying.
They did so well. They did so well.
I will.
My sister's a-
Me too, Dan, me too.
Incubation. And she's just like so stressed because
Hello, guys.
Great. Do you want to see his new toy?
Sure. Oh, he's gonna have a tractor or something?
We found,
He throws rocks, Laura said,
daughter.
at things and hits them.
goes down to the ocean. So,
1 hour COVID test.
this is his birthday present.
Oh, how fun.
It's a quad
Look at him.
made in Canada. It's a legit quad. Throttle, brakes, everything. But it's rated for 3-year-olds.
That's amazing.
And it has,
I love
I
it.
love charts.
You
I
can
love
have it.
sales.
And so he's capped at 6 miles an hour right now. It goes up to 20.
Wow.
And it has a little parent remote, so when he's about to run into my car, you can stop him.
Oh, fun.
Oh, that's awesome. I was gonna ask if there was some override that
This
you
is our
could do.
geriatric dogs with
Yeah,
him.
exactly.
Yeah, so what I have found is the remote is less for him crashing and more for him being mean to the dogs.
Oh!
And we stop him and make them say sorry before they go again.
And that's the thing, is it does.
Wow.
I can tell I chase them.
Sometimes it's just supposed to help.
He
them.
did have a learning experience yesterday. He's left-handed, so he gets on the right side and the throttle's on the right side.
Oh.
And he went to step on and he twisted the throttle so the
Oh,
rod
no.
took off and he didn't let go, so he got drugged. I was like ow, because I'm trying to get the remote out. But he got back on. And he
Good
drove
for
into
him.
the garage. He did not want to get back on, but mom said you're getting back on.
He has a great helmet, I like that.
He has a full helmet, wears his safety vest. Yeah.
That's fun.
Wow.
That's really something at 3 to be able to drive that.
Well, he's been riding on the, I probably shouldn't say this while we're live streaming, but he has been riding on the
Lawnmower?
dirt bike,
Oh, the dirt bike.
on Kenny's dirt bike for about a year. And he like just holds on, so he's got the balance and, you know, Kenny shows him like how the throttle works and whatnot. They don't go out of first gear.
And what do you do on your private land? Just-
Your private business.
I
So,
noticed he's always
um,
wearing a helmet.
Yeah, he always wears a helmet and it's so funny, he's got this little dirt
I want
bike.
one of those little things.
Right?
I would like that.
The weight limit is
Yeah.
quite high. He and I could ride it together. So
Really?
yeah.
It's, yeah. Are they expensive?
Chips, excuse me.
Really?
No.
Is it gas, electric?
It's electric. Yeah.
How
And
many
so
miles do you, or how much time do you get out
He
of the
gets
charge?
about 5 hours and he'll
Really?
drain the battery every day.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and it does, like, we have the trails and everything.
Yep.
And so he and Kenny went down and they used the tractor to build some cool jumps and some cool things and he goes down
That's so
and
fun.
does all
Yeah, I
the
love it.
jumps he made and
They come in orchard sizes.
He's 3. Like,
That's
he's
amazing.
Well, I don't know if the company is big,
That's so amazing.
Mhm.
but that's the one we got for him.
Yeah.
So,
Well, it's so funny what you'll do with your own kids, and then, because I grew up on a farm, a wheat farm, and so of course, my dad threw us up on the equipment as soon as we could,
Right.
you know, hold on to
As soon
something.
as you can reach the
Right.
pedals or whatever.
I take his grandchildren there, and he's like, "Don't get them dirty. Don't let them touch anything." You know? I'm like, I used to stand under things. You'd be like, "Here, hold this."
Yeah.
Okay, Dad.
Yeah.
You know, like.
Well, you know, I was thinking about it, our grandson, I put him on the ride mower, you know,
Mhm.
Yep.
and he really struggled with steering it,
Mm-hmm.
right? I'm like, God, I think at 7 or 8, I was
Mhm.
able to do that because
Mhm.
I had experience.
Yep.
Yeah.
So,
Well, he's been mowing the lawn with me since, I used to just put him in my carrier and then go out and do it. And so he like was in the carrier, then he was on my lap, then he stands in the center, then we got him a cart to ride in the back.
Mhm.
And he gets out and picks up things and throws them in his cart.
That's awesome.
And, I mean, it's really helpful, like you don't have to stop ever. You just go and do it.
Mhm.
And
Well,
then-
right now it's fun. When it becomes his job, it'll be different. But right now, it's fun.
I know, like picking rocks in the arena is great fun for
Right.
him. I'm like, yes.
Hold on to that spirit.
Right? Yeah.
Yes.
But he's super cute. He's got this little dirt bike and a little guy that rides the dirt bike. And he won't let the guy ride his dirt bike until he gets the helmet. So it has this teeny tiny little helmet and he like always knows exactly where it is. So that the guy can ride the helmet and wear the helmet and ride his dirt bike.
That's awesome.
Great.
So who has the new mule? You have a new mule?
I do.
Was that the mule that you got from, it was a rescue mule or something that you were
Not
waiting
this
on?
guy. I got him off Craigslist.
Oh, okay.
I had been looking. I
Like you do.
interviewed about, I don't know, half a dozen mules in a couple of states. And finally found someone for me.
That is such a Whidbey Island
Yeah,
sentence.
are you riding this mule?
Not yet. I want to get to know him 1st.
Mhm.
He needs time to decompress and just learn
Yeah.
that I'm his buddy. But
Yeah.
eventually. And he's just a delight. He's such
Yeah.
a sweetheart.
I love that.
He was a little shut down when I first met him, like a little
Yeah.
withdrawn. But he's warming up now that he knows we're safe. And
How many hands?
just a little guy. He's 14'3".
That's bigger than my minis. They're
Yeah.
28 inches, so.
Yeah, I grew up with warm
Cute.
bloods. So
Yeah.
You're-
He's little.
Your minis are literally the size of Cooper's hut.
Yeah, I mean, when you see
There's tall dogs.
Laura and I standing next to our minis, they look like full-size horses. They do.
But Kayla stepped over the back of one of them.
Yeah, she did. She did. They're literally, they're tiny.
Yeah.
They're adorable.
Yeah.
My mom has a couple of mini mules, and
Yeah.
my mule's gonna meet her mules soon. But you know, her mules are bigger than a miniature horse. They're like Shelton pony size.
Yeah.
They're pretty cute though.
Yeah.
They still have the great big ears. I mean, their ears are
Yep.
30% bigger than a horse's ear.
That's awesome. One of the most Whidbey Island sentences I've ever heard in my life. I'm taking a carload of kids home from a birthday party. And we're on Campbell Road, I think. And there's these goats just kind of chilling in the middle of the road, you know, like they do
Were they
when they
my
get
goats?
out. Possibly, I don't know.
They got arrested.
This was millions of years ago, you know, when my kids were little. My kids were little, but so the kids are excited because of this goat traffic jam in the middle of the road. And so I'm stopping and I'm contemplating options, right? Like, how do I find the people who belong to the goats? And one of the kids from the back seat pipes up, "Hey, I know those goats!" And sort of naming names and who they belong, you know. And
Aww.
I'm like, okay, problem solved. Just like that is such a Whidbey Island thing for, you know, a 9-year-old to be like, oh yes, I know them all by name.
I have a bus driver that probably 3 times a year will come in and say, hey, will you call this teacher and tell him his cows are out of the Maxwell?
happened
We had a horse wandering in the
Yeah.
transportation department.
Yep.
So he locked the gates, we catch the horse.
So Whidbey Island Equine Community would tell me that they chased the horse into there so that it wouldn't get hit by the car, and then told the owner that that's what the horse was.
I
It
was
was one of our
at,
employees actually chasing
Yeah.
it.
Oh, there you
It
go.
was.
and I was at the dentist, this is how small the island is, I was at the dentist in Langley, and Jody, who's JJ's wife, says, look at the horse that's over at the district office. It's so-and-so's horse, I'm gonna call her and tell her her horse is at the district office.
Yeah.
I love going in there because Colton and Hazel are
Yeah.
best. They want to get married,
They're 5.
Yeah.
so they are best buddies, and so it's always nice going there and seeing them.
My goats, Jack and Joxer, got arrested in Susan's yard, and I had to do a walk of shame in my pajamas walking them
Oh,
home
no.
during the morning commute.
Oof.
Called my
Just
boss,
having
was like,
goats.
I'm gonna be late.
Goats are out.
My
My
goats
goats
just
got
got
arrested.
arrested.
Eric
I know we
goats.
gotta get back to work, but I used to put my goat Jasper Jules in the passenger seat and put his seatbelt on across his shoulder. When he was sitting like this, he wouldn't use the bathroom in the car.
Yeah.
But he had to be sitting up like this, with his arm on the window. And I used to take him to drive-thrus just so I could buy him a bagel and see the look on the barista's face.
That's perfect.
That is awesome.
All right, back to work.
So, we've got ourselves a grid. I love grids, they're like Excel spreadsheets on paper. I was just looking at this, and 5 is about professional capacity of school personnel, it's about teacher professional development. I feel like that doesn't, it sort of hits on some of what we're doing, but it's not right on, and we've got to trim some things. So I'd like to suggest that we cull that.
Sure.
Yep.
I think those things can be spoken to in some of these other standards.
Yeah, it felt like something where we were more grazing that. Clearly, we've got all,
Significant alignment on the
yeah,
floor.
so I mean, that, all of that or most of that should absolutely be on there. And then we've got some, like, I see mission, vision, and core values, and that's hugely important, but it's also, like, to me, that feels like table stakes in some ways. Like,
Yeah, in my,
I'm not sure, I don't understand
okay,
this
so it's a
colloquialism. Yes.
So it's, you know, to start around.
Oh, it's an
with-
ante.
It's an
Yes.
ante, yeah.
Okay, I gotcha.
So it's on the table already.
Already,
It's-
yep. Okay.
Then we
Thank
did,
you.
and we did evaluate you on that this year.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
that might also be something that we look at, is look at what we evaluated you on this year and try to shift our priorities some to hit spots we didn't hit previously. So just,
So, I think, you know, the chart would lend us to 2, 3, and 4.
right.
Part of
Right.
something I want to throw out there, though, is it's really hard to focus on 2, 3, and 4 and do all the, like, those are 3 really big ones.
Yeah.
It's hard to focus on all 3 and do them well.
Yep.
So, do we have priority within those? And do we also want to look at something that might be a little less meaty to balance the intensity that we're putting on 2, 3, and or 4?
Yeah, and there, yeah, I think that's really important. And there's something to be said if we get all of, if, for instance, 2, 3, and 6 cover all that stuff already. Even if this does all of these really well, this might do 1 better then we're not getting through very well.
What are your checks versus plus?
So the plus is the ones we thought worked really well for that.
Okay.
The checks were the ones that it also covered this.
Okay,
Going back to kindergarten here.
I'm good. Just-
Checks and pluses. So,
Joe, do you have a preference?
yeah. Well, yeah, absolutely, we need to get.
Well, I'm, again, 2, 3, and 4 really cover what the board is looking for. I don't know.
I wonder if we could look at 4 and look at 2 and do kind of a cost comparison. Is most of what we're looking for in 2 already embedded in 4? You know what I mean? We also talked a little bit about cherry picking. So I see some pluses in several categories. So that might be a thought process we could go through as well. Is just looking at those particular check marks or the plus marks and seeing if those would fit.
For instance, we can get a few of 6 and a few of 2.
Right.
To
Yeah.
cover goal 1. And then goal 2 is really strongly there, and goal 3 is really strongly there.
Right.
So
Part of what I also just want to speak to though, is we also have to reopen schools full-time next year,
yes,
That is true.
right?
yeah.
So,
I wonder if we can find that in goal 4 or standard 4.
well, that's where I'm
Yeah.
thinking if we don't, like, trust me, Andrea is a very intense person and very much enjoys intensity. And I don't know that we want all of our focus to be diving in so intently that we don't leave capacity for reopening.
Well, and I think that 4 actually does speak to reopening.
I do
Okay.
too. A in
Yeah.
particular.
Yeah.
Okay,
Procedures and practices that advance the safety and well-being of students, employees, and volunteers.
yes. And I'm also still waiting to hear from Joe.
Yeah, you know, I see the title of 2, but when you look at the actual themes, they are covered in 4.
Well, I think that,
I think
C
3 is essential,
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
and that's our business.
Yeah.
so let's
Right.
put 3 and 4.
So then why don't we take a look at 2 and 6 in particular and see,
If you just want to pick a
cherry
letter or
pick a
2.
couple of them, yeah. So let's see what, and let's even, let's look at what we have in 2 and 6. Let's look at 2 and see what is the most important ones we think. I think C is the most important personally. That's the works to reduce opportunity and achievement gaps,
Right,
which hits
Yep.
everything.
yep.
See, and I think A on 2.
I had A as the most
Yeah,
important there.
I think those are both good.
Yeah, especially if you read how it's described in the distinguished column.
Yep.
Uses formal and informal partnerships with diverse groups to develop a district-wide welcoming culture that honors the values, beliefs, norms, and traditions of all stakeholders,
Mhm.
and integrate diverse representation into school and district decision-making processes.
Absolutely.
That feels like it really hits what we're being asked to do.
Yeah.
But I think C is also a complement to that.
Well, and I love D, but I think that A and C cover D.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and D is really what the board has been engaging in.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You're looking at your policies, you're making sure they're inclusive.
So let's look at C. Or 6.
6.
And see what really stood out for us there. A and B in particular.
Yeah. And if we achieve to A, if we achieve what would be described as distinguished performance with 2A, we would probably be doing it through 6A and B. But 6A and B are more of a strategy level.
See, when I think of goal 1 in relation to 6, I see C.
Yeah. I think that's
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's a clear alignment.
Like, my priority is C there, because I think A and B and D and E and F happen if you can do C.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree, because I'm gonna say B feels important to me, but B can be wrapped up in C.
I love that.
And I think that part of what I'm hearing the community say, you know, Brooke, I know that you
Yeah.
heard this too, is there is frustration that we haven't done C.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And
Which,
just
for those watching at home, is develop strategies for constructive resolution of conflicts with families and community members.
Well, it really speaks directly to the goal,
Yeah.
right? If we're
Yeah.
gonna
I was gonna
engage
say.
in facilitating restorative conversations.
That's almost what we just wrote there, yeah.
see.
Yeah.
We're just using restorative conversations as the medium to do that work.
Well, so if we're looking at A and C2, C6, let's see, is there one thing from the mission, vision, and goals that really speaks to us? I mean, C is kind of huge there, which is holds board and staff mutually accountable for striving towards the vision. I mean, that is your job in a nutshell, Joe.
I'm sorry, which standard are we on? One?
Standard 1, C.
Thank you. Yeah, I had C and D as
creating a culture speaks to transformation.
Okay. So what if we do that?
1C.
1C, 2A and C, 3 and 4, 6C. I think that covers what we're looking for really strongly without getting things that we aren't as concerned about.
Does that meet your thought for like lessening the intensity
Yeah.
of what we're asking?
Well,
Or of what we're measuring, rather?
And we could also drop some of these out if we.
I think the question is really, so I think the question really is for Joe. Because, you know, Joe has to do the work.
And since we are picking some of these, I think we could drop 1 or 2 from these also if we feel that we are overloading. But
With 5,
With 3, I would leave out B and C,
Okay.
to me.
well, it feels like C really speaks towards our goal 2.
I see C in other areas a lot.
Yeah, but it's also, when it goes to policies and practices like that,
Yeah.
it, distinguishes, motivates
Yeah.
members of the school community to seek improvement in district policies.
And that's a whole bunch of other parts too.
Yeah.
So
But-
if we're at A and D there,
I think that's what
Yeah.
our goal is actually asking for, is A and D.
yeah.
Exactly.
So then let's look at 4, since there's 5 of them there.
4A feels really important in this time of reemergence with
Mhm.
COVID,
Yeah.
because that prioritizes safety.
Mm-hmm.
And B feels very
Yep.
much like our 2.
Yeah, all of 4 to me,
Mm-hmm.
I would leave them all in personally.
Okay?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think so.
Okay, so let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Oh, we have 11 goals here.
11
11
Focus areas?
Yeah,
Focus areas.
11 focus areas that you would be
under
rated
3
on.
goals. And, again, best practice is 1 goal, right?
Right.
So
Mhm.
we're already,
Yeah, and so we're
but
cutting down
they definitely link together.
So we're going from 15 to 11 in here to really focus
Strands.
that, letters, I don't
Yeah.
know what they, themes.
Joe, do you feel like that provides enough clarity?
I do.
Okay.
I'm going to write that down.
So it's 1C, 2A and C, A and D, all of 4, and 6C. What do you think, Dan? You're sitting back quietly.
I don't think it's enough.
Remember, it flows downhill.
Seven and 8.
No, actually, they all seem very appropriate to the goals that you have created. So, and a lot of those are intertwined.
Yes.
So I didn't like there's
Mhm.
11 distinct
No.
themes going there.
Yeah.
There's maybe
Mm-hmm.
4 or 5 really that just kind of are manifested in different ways.
So to thread the needle all the way through, I see the mission and vision in what we've put forward, right? We can see Joe's evaluation. Principals, they're on AWSP.
Mhm.
Okay, so I can say from my own knowledge, I can see our goals reflected in their evaluation.
Mhm.
Teachers are Danielson.
Mhm.
I can see goal number 2 reflected in Danielson. But I don't know that 1 and 3 need to be.
Well, 3 is gonna permeate, right?
Yeah.
We're looking at
Yeah.
reducing, dismantling systemic barriers.
That's everywhere.
Yeah.
That's from the
Yeah.
classroom to the
Mhm.
Yeah.
district office to everywhere in between.
But I don't know that teachers need, I don't know that I need just even need no thread all the way to their evaluation. I know, well, I've heard.
Yeah.
Yep. But if I think about it through those pieces, I feel like these goals move us forward. And make sense to everyone that as it's going to.
So I'm gonna share the goal that we drafted with, let's see. And
I've started doing it alphabetical by first name, just so I can remember to get everyone included.
and Damien. Brooke and Andrea already shared on this.
Yes.
These are the draft goals.
And so I will plan to mention these during board comments at
Yeah.
workshop tonight, at the end, just so people who are watching the retreat
Yeah.
know what we've
Yeah.
talked about.
Okay.
Just to get them.
And I love where they ended. I think they're really awesome, how we crafted them together and where they ended.
Yep. And I will modify this so that it actually matches.
Oh, yes, that was my next request.
Just the letters that you've picked,
Mhm.
Yes.
right?
That helps me with
Yeah.
Yeah.
see
And-
the big picture again.
Yep.
Yeah.
But
Thank
you'll
you.
keep this so that you know what the rubric says.
Exactly.
Yes.
All right, so we've got that.
Yes, yes, yes.
Great.
So the next thing on the list is something that Damien actually brought up, which is changing the timing on when the superintendent's contract extension vote comes.
So I gave you, this is a page in your folder. It's on the left side, first document. It is the timeline for check-in as well as for that piece, which I've highlighted at the bottom, that actually is drafted out of the contract. So I left some months in there. Again, the June review of the prior evaluation. This is our board retreat and discussion of evaluation goals and timeline. And then you're putting it on the agenda for next meeting. And then normally, during conference, we would have a retreat and the superintendent would update the board on progress for that first couple months of the year. I left November in there blank in the event that you do want to change. We don't have Chrissy, do we have a meeting set for November? Is it,
It's normally,
it's normally the Wednesday before you go to conference.
Mhm.
And typically, when we've had to go to Spokane, it's been in the morning, but since you're headed to, again, we will have new board members, whether it's the current board or a new board. There will be people who have to go to boot camp, which is which day, Christy?
November, so the 18th to the 21st is the conference.
So the 17th is boot camp?
I think 18th. I think that's the beginning.
Sometimes
I
boot
think
camp's
it was the day before.
Wednesday?
Yeah, usually it's
Mhm.
Wednesday
Yeah.
boot camp, which is why we've done the meeting in the morning.
I signed up both Marnie and Anna ready for the
For boot camp?
Yeah.
boot camp.
Okay.
Yeah. So the 17th is what I have as the meeting. But we have it for 6:30, so.
Yeah, I just want to see, I'm going to pull up the annual conference. And again, just to be clear, the registrations are transferable. Should there be a different name?
Well,
So-
and to bring up why Damien and I brought this up in the first place is when I first joined the board, one of the first things that I was faced with was approving Joe's contract extension. And myself and the other new board member had some mental struggles about whether we had enough information to properly evaluate Joe's performance. And I ended up voting, and the other board member ended up abstaining. And we'd like to avoid people feeling like they have to do that. So the thinking is, the wording says it just has to be no later than February 1st.
Okay.
So the thinking is to set it at the beginning of November, or whatever our meeting in November is, the business meeting in November.
So
To
So
extend the
would it
contract.
be new board
It
members?
would be the existing board members.
Mm.
be the current.
So this
Yeah.
would be moving the evaluation earlier.
Yes.
Which would
Not
give-
the evaluation.
No.
I'm sorry,
Just
not the
the
evaluation,
contract.
the contract decision.
Yeah.
The contract.
Which would give the superintendent an additional window during which to have that information.
Yes.
As well.
Yes.
So I see that as a secondary
Yes.
benefit.
Mhm.
So, Christie's accurate, boot camp is the Thursday, so Wednesday, the 17th is your board meeting.
Good.
So that would be the date we put here.
Yeah.
So the conference is actually the 18th to the 20th.
And I just sent everyone the link to the agenda, so in your email, so.
Thank you.
can see that.
18 to 20, yeah, so it's 18 to 20, that's correct. So November 17th,
And I have it as a 6:30 PM, not a,
Yeah.
because normally we do it midday, because I would usually get flights from.
Right, right. But if we're just driving to Bellevue, we don't need,
Yeah.
yeah.
so it would be contract consideration would be November 17th.
Okay.
Well, and again, we can't make that decision here and now. We can't make that decision until we have a business meeting, I
Well,
believe.
you
Because that would
can,
be action.
it's not action, there's no action.
Oh, it's just we
Because
put it
you're
on the
just putting
agenda
it-
then.
Putting it on the agenda,
Okay.
that's a
Yeah.
decision that
That
the board president can make,
And secretary. Yeah.
right? So if you want it considered at that meeting,
I would appreciate that, just because I know that sometimes there's, especially if you have new board members, right? Then part of the conference is then focused on, you know, what do you need to know, like, and it's not, the conversation is not necessarily focused on what it could be.
Mhm.
It's focused in on trying to
Catch up.
catch up. And if, Joe, if you already know
Mhm.
what your next move is, then I think it could actually center that conversation on what it should be at the conference.
Yeah. And just from my own personal experience, I was trying to catch up, and I had been attending meetings
Mhm.
for 9 months at that point,
Mhm.
and 10 months at that point, and I was still rushing to catch up on what
you
actually
don't know
happened.
what you don't know.
That's right.
Because
Yeah.
folks come into school board service thinking they're gonna either change the world or I mean, but we have so many rules
Mhm.
that govern what we do, that you come in and you're like, oh, right, I'm one of 5, I'm part of a board, I have no individual power. It takes a while to, I mean, you can attest to that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I remember very early on feeling like I was really limited in my feeling of self-expression just because I didn't want to put a foot wrong. So
Mhm.
it would be great to have board members who've developed the confidence to be fully present in the conversation by the time
Yeah.
this contract review rolls around.
Yeah.
And know what the goals were intended to be.
Right,
Mhm.
I agree
As
with
well
that
as what
too.
they were written.
Mhm. It gives them more time to ask questions.
Mhm.
It gives, you know, everyone who is experienced more time to have conversations. And even just get comfortable with asking the questions.
Yeah.
Because like you said, you don't know what you don't know. Sometimes you don't know what questions to ask in order to become informed.
Yep.
So,
Yeah.
Okay, so it sounds like Damien suggested this idea, so even though he's not here, I think that
It's fair to say he agrees with
Yeah.
that.
Or did at one point at least.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So it sounds like as board president, you can simply put this on an early November agenda
Yep.
rather than on a February agenda?
Yep, yeah, I'll just put it on the agenda November 17th, and if for some reason a board member, the rest of the board wants to change that,
Right,
They
you can
can-
always table it.
vote to table it till later.
Great.
Gotcha.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So. Just wanna. The new board is seated in December,
Yeah,
Mhm.
right?
yeah,
The election happens, but the new board doesn't get seated until December.
yes,
So the board, the current board is in place until then,
yes,
regardless of the election
yes,
outcome.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
just want to be clear.
And what does that mean in terms of conference participation?
So if there are new board members, they would go to conference.
Okay,
Yeah, the
makes
conference
the
is
most
for the
sense.
elected
Yeah.
board,
okay, got it.
Yeah.
not yet the sworn in board, but the
Got it.
elected board.
Good to know.
Okay, we're rolling through this. I thought we'd want the most time for the board self-evaluation, and that's what's last on what we talked about originally. If we power through that and have time in the next hour and a half, we also have student board representative discussion and board visits to schools.
Can I just back
Please.
up
Please.
one sec with this timeline, just to
Yes.
make sure you're, because again, this is the superintendent's timeline, so it's not board action.
Right.
Though we can make it board action, I mean, if you wanted to. You know, again, I'm just saying you could do
Right.
anything
Right.
as a board if the board selected to. But, so the December is the board reorganization, then typically in January, there's a mid-year update on goals, and we usually do that at a retreat. We didn't this year. Do we have a retreat scheduled in January, Christy?
Yep.
We do.
For the January 12th workshop.
January 12th, okay. So that's when that would happen, is an update on goals, January 12th. And then, again, in April, typically the superintendent will give the board the self-evaluation, and then the board works on that in May and provides it to the superintendent. So that timeline, okay, that's good. Great, thank you.
Okay, so did everyone get a chance to look over these 70-odd questions in the board self-evaluation?
41 pages.
Appreciated the color coding.
Yes, that was
That was
helpful.
very helpful for scanning through it. In fact, I scanned through and picked out the ones that stood out for me as in two categories. One of which was those that had a ton of the green, or blue, which was sometimes, most of the time. That were mostly blue and yellow, which is most of the time and some of the time. And those which had
Feel free.
multiple people saying some of the time. Because I thought that those were the ones that stood out the most for me as areas that we can improve. And I don't know if people have specific overarching comments that they'd like to make or discuss or anything like that.
I might need Wi-Fi.
The guest account worked for
Ah,
me.
there it is. All right. Groovy, thanks.
And the areas where someone said they did not know is absolutely a spot where we can provide more information. And that can be via
Did-
email, via meetings with Joe, here, whatever works best for people.
Did all 5 of us
Yes.
respond? Okay,
There
sorry.
were 5 responses.
Yeah, it was interesting. Usually, it gets sent to the superintendent. They send it directly to you?
They sent it directly to me, because I made contact with WASDA
Ah, okay,
to talk
perfect.
about the
Yeah.
process.
Yep. Yeah, and all 5 board members responded, which is great.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. So there are a lot of really good things on here where almost all of us, where 3 to 5 of us were saying, we always do this. And that's fantastic. There were a couple of spots that I thought needed some attention. In particular, the annual assessments of your performance and set goals for improvement. For the carry out annual assessments of its performance, we had 2 people say we always do it, 2 people say we sometimes do it, and 1 person say they don't know.
I think I was a sometime because I think the last few years we haven't done this.
Correct, yeah.
I think, and it goes back prior to you. I don't think we did it.
We did not do it last year.
But there was a
No,
point
even
at
I
which
think
the
the year before
board,
we didn't.
the
Yeah.
board didn't, the board at the time didn't find it effective. And so they kind of, did, how are we doing on board protocol, right? They sat and went through that, but this is a totally new board now.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I think that's why, Andrea, though, your recollection is accurate, because I remember the board didn't do it for a couple of years.
Yeah.
Well, I think I might have been, I'm not sure,
Yeah.
because I haven't been through a full cycle yet.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
No, my first year, I don't know the whole way down.
So that's something we're clearly fixing, so check. The next one was set goals for its improvement. And theoretically, that'll be the next step after this, is picking out what we feel that we need to do better on in the next year. So if we decide that this is something that works well for us, we could check if we've done it better next year. So those were the first 2 there. The next one I noticed that was problematic, or that caught my attention, was the collaborating with colleagues around the region. And I agree on this.
No, we
Yeah. And
Again, COVID
Yeah.
impacted that.
But I think honestly for the better. Because all those regional meetings
Oh,
I had to
right.
went
attend it.
virtual.
Yeah.
And
That's
it was like
true.
the first time I could actually go because
Yeah.
before our regional meeting was always in Everett. And so it was like, I don't want to get back on a ferry and go back to Everett.
Right. Or
So-
it's in some other obscure place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They've been in Marysville or in,
Where
I mean, anything's obscure to us,
Right.
Yeah.
right? Or maybe we're the obscure ones, I
One
don't
of the
know.
promising things about this was that this year we did see some really good collaboration with the other districts on the island.
Mhm.
And especially in my experience as the legislative representative, the collaborations that took place in our region and with our other Whidbey-based school districts
Yeah.
around that legislative
Mhm.
advocacy were really promising.
Mhm.
So I feel a lot of excitement about leaning into this.
Yeah.
yeah, and during those regional meetings, I met several other board members that
Mhm.
we had very interesting back and forth discussions about the SWAT program and about the Black Lives Matter banner and about just the difficulties of working in a small rural district. And
Yeah.
Mhm.
a lot of good information there. So I actually really hope that they continue doing virtual meetings. But I also agree that, or I also think that having the conference in person is huge, because I didn't
Yeah.
have any interaction during the
No,
conference.
I miss the
Yeah.
conference in person, but I hope these regional meetings stay virtual.
Agreed.
Yeah, it's interesting, we have superintendent's meetings, and we had gone to like once a week, once every other week. And in the past, we'd driven to the ESD. And so it's a hybrid this year. We're gonna go to the ESD like 3 or 4 times so that we get in-person interaction. And then the other months, we're gonna do virtual, so we'll actually get more interaction instead of less. So there is some benefit to it, being forced to do Zoom and get comfortable with it.
Yeah.
True.
So I'm gonna put this on my notes, just as something that we can look to build on, that on the island, and also stretching out at the conference. The conference is so good for that. I met a bunch of people, both at WASDA and other board members, that really helped me get my feet under me. And it was just, I missed that pretty badly this year.
And I love the conference.
Yeah, and it's, I just like it because, we actually can, again, just be able to sit down and have a meal together, and just talk about non-work related, right? Just to know people that you're with. The
Joe
conference
still
is-
really wants to do an icebreaker.
No, what I really wanted, the conference is back in Bellevue,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And that's where it was the last time we went.
Yeah.
And I still remember our meal.
Yeah, well, that was a fantastic way to get to know one another.
Right?
Yes. It was very passionate.
Yes. The next thing that stood out to me was the pursuing professional development to improve board members' knowledge and skills by attending conferences, holding study sessions. And it feels to me like we're already working on that with Dr. Campbell's training, with the possibility of the other group that
Hooks.
well, yes, hooks, but
Oh,
in
yes,
January.
Heather.
Yeah.
I forget.
I remember Dr. Boateng, but I don't remember the other person's.
Lechner.
Yes, Dr. Lechner,
Yeah.
yes. So it feels like we're working on that, so we can hopefully get that most of the time, some of the time.
Can I give some context for
Please.
that? So, depending on district size, right, board members have different levels of kind of expectations, engagements, those
Mhm.
kinds of things. I think that the reference I'm going to is Everett, right? But I think, like, if we think about what their board engages in and does, we have a lot of opportunity to really lean into learning more about what our role could be, or leaning into those professional development pieces. And there is a culture in a district like Everett, which is one I can speak to, where it's not an optional thing to
Yeah.
do. And that's hard to do when you have a group of volunteers,
Mhm.
right? It's hard to require volunteers to do things.
Mhm.
But I think that if we think about us as a board, really getting clear about what is our vision, what are our goals, and then how can we hold each other accountable to participating in them. And I think that, like, when I think of professional development, I know I take a ton of professional development, but I don't necessarily always wear my board hat when I'm doing it. And that's the part I think we have to kind of iron out is, what do we expect of each other as board members, and what are kind of those non-negotiables?
Yeah, that resonates for me. Clear agreements up front so that we can then hold one another accountable.
The conferences tended to be a non-negotiable.
Yeah. Well, you're legally required to do the training if you're new.
Well, open public meetings and
And in your,
public records.
at the start of your third year, you're required also, I believe.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you
you
have
have
to
to
do
re-up
it.
every-
There's a frequency to it,
Yeah.
and conference
Yeah.
takes care of it.
Yeah.
And there's a new requirement to take the equity
The
training
equity.
as well.
Equity training, yeah.
Yes.
Which they're developing.
Well, and theoretically, both of the trainings that we've scheduled, all three of the trainings that we've scheduled would check all that box as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there were a couple of others that really stood out to me, and that was publicly recognized efforts of schools in improving student learning.
Yeah, that really took a hit this year.
Yeah.
We have, in the past, brought students to the board, had board visits to schools, real opportunity for recognition.
I have to find where the heck that was.
It was on
Did I make it too
page.
warm?
I'm okay, but
All right.
Oh, you're
I
right.
run cold,
Standard
so-
4, question 55.
Yeah.
So I think that's something that really stood out to me as something we can do better. I may very well have been one of the always people, but I think I don't remember what I listed myself as there, but.
I think, 2 years ago, I think we did a nice job with this,
Mhm.
and then COVID was survival.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it speaks to one of the topics you have, actually, Brooke, is the idea of board visits.
Yeah.
So, and again, in my experience, it's best if we schedule it and not leave it to board members to schedule themselves in a building, because inevitably, if people find it, time gets away from you. Whereas if there's a commitment and you're gonna be escorted by a student and
Mhm.
get the opportunity to see classes.
That was so awesome.
Yeah,
Well, there's that clarity planning again, where
Right.
then we can hold each other accountable for
right.
making the appointments that we make.
Mhm.
That's good modeling too for kids.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it's been, again, a variety of ways. But I think the board really appreciated having students lead it and then, giving a time where if staff wanted to stop in and chit chat, they could and.
That's the one thing I really missed
Yeah.
2 years ago, is we did, because everything shut down, just as we were ramping up the
Yep.
school visits, I didn't get to just sit in the staff lounge and say, hey,
Mhm.
how's it going?
Right. Yep.
One of the things that I really appreciated in one of my nonprofit employment scenarios was, as a staff member, I was able to do something kind of like speed dating with the board, where I
Right.
was able to rotate among tables and just spend 5 minutes sharing about my work and understanding the board's vision.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That's a cool idea.
Yeah.
That's a cool idea.
This was one that I didn't have on this list, but I just noticed, question 62, regularly evaluate and adjust resources and strategies for closing achievement gaps to maximize their effectiveness. That was another one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, goal 2 and Dr. Campbell,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So that seems like something we are taking care of or working on. It just caught my attention because there was that block of 2 yellow votes. There we go. At 63, actually, advocate at the local, state, and federal levels on behalf of students and the district. And we've done that once with that legislative visit with the other 2 districts on the island. That was fantastic.
Mhm.
But
And that was an interesting experience for me because it was my first time being involved in the legislative process as an advocate. It also, I learned from others with more experience how much more effective it can be to actually be on the Hill
Mhm.
chit-chatting
Mhm.
in a real room with real people.
Mhm.
So I have a feeling that as COVID restrictions ease, there might be more opportunity to network and build relationships.
And that is, every time we talk about that advocacy, it's develop the relationship, do it ahead of time, get on a first name basis,
Yep.
so that when you call because you need something, they'll
yeah.
hear you.
Mhm.
Well, and this is something that the 2 of us in
Right.
particular can focus on.
Yeah, absolutely, and this legislative representative role that I hold is something I'd love to lean into, learn and grow in. So I'll look to you for some
Yeah, and
thought
conference
leadership
will
on how to do
have-
that.
There will be sessions at conference specifically to legislative rep.
Yeah.
Great,
Those were really valuable for me 2 years ago.
excellent. I look forward to learning more.
And I want to connect with other school board chairs in the area
Mhm.
also to build that, because the connection you've got with the superintendents in each of those other 2 districts is phenomenal.
Mhm.
And
It's really helpful.
I think it's really valuable.
The other thing that WASDA offers, again, it's what do they call it? Leadership camp, but it's an ongoing course of study that you participate in like quarterly to become, and you can also go for board of distinction, and it's getting some consistency
Mhm.
as a board.
Yeah. Well, we need to have.
Like Girl Scouts for boards? Get your badges.
I don't think you have to go camping. Yeah.
Oh,
darn it.
That's the fun part.
I'd be okay with that.
There are cookies.
Yes.
S'mores?
Yeah,
Always cookies.
could be.
Always cookies.
Always cookies, good.
I'd like to get a nice steady board membership for a little while. The next one on here I saw was the next question, 64, model cultural, racial, and ethnic understanding and sensitivity is, 4 of us said most of the time, 1 of us said some of the time, and that's something I'd like to make sure, to try to work together to get so that we're at least all in the most of the time.
Mhm.
Because one of my personal goals from the time I took over board chair is to make the school board and school board meetings safe places for people of color, because they are not right now. Someone speaks up, they get a lot of commentary. They become a lightning rod, and you can't have an equitable
Well,
conversation like that.
Again, as a school board, it's not about limiting discussion, it's about creating a standard,
Mhm,
right?
exactly.
I mean, again, the experience of people just, and I mean no disrespect to anyone, but when public comment happens or dialogue happens, there's engagement as opposed to just a continuing string of non sequiturs. It feels like somebody muttering under their breath rather than really engaging in a conversation about a difficult topic.
Yeah.
And so going back to Robert's rules, going back to engagement in person, I think will help that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Going back to a comment in public comment rather than
Right.
a string of them.
Do we also, do we have a stability clause within the district?
We do for the board, I know.
We do. We have a policy on behavior.
Mm-hmm.
We do.
Mhm.
And it certainly applies, like if staff members feel like they're being treated poorly, they have recourse.
Yeah.
Even if it's a parent or member of the public. But I will look it up later.
Because I think that might be something to lean into in referencing, citing, holding people to.
Mhm.
Because I know that, you know, it's understandable that people have strong feelings whichever way, right? Because it's their children.
Right.
And we all care about our children. And so if I think about, you know, IEP meetings that I've led where you have people who have very strong feelings and bring a lot of passion to the table. Those meetings have gone better when we have grounded and rooted ourselves in civility clauses. And they have also given clear expectations as to when the conversation stops with that kind of a parameter. And it might be helpful, especially if we are going back to in-person, and people are going to have feelings about school reopening and whether kids can wear masks or not wear masks, or have to show they're vaccinated or not show they're vaccinated. To have established a system of this is how we will communicate, and this is our expectation of ourselves, and this is our expectation of you. And if any of us are out of alignment with that, the conversation stops.
Yeah.
Because I think that we owe that to, because it trickles down, right? So if we don't hold that standard as board members, we are setting a precedence and we are setting an expectation that Joe does not hold it as a superintendent, that Dan does not hold it as the assistant superintendent, that principals don't hold it, which means that teachers don't hold it. And I want to be sure that we are modeling that it is healthy and it is okay to have boundaries, and it is healthy and okay to engage in professional conversation and to have professional disagreements, but that there is also the ability to say, I'm uncomfortable and I'm done.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So policy 4200 is safe and orderly learning environment, public access to schools, staff, and students. Certainly, the board may want to review that. It's contacts with staff, it'll be, uninterrupted, except in an emergency, and the board encourages visits, and the superintendent establish guidelines, but anything that is disrupting or obstructing any school program, activity, meeting, or threatens to do so, or is committing, threatening to imminently commit, or inciting another to commit any act which would disturb or interfere function, process, or procedure of any student, official, classified, or certificated staff member. So basically, it's pretty blanket that, if you're gonna be disruptive, we have the opportunity to remove you.
Well, and there's a version of this for the school board also.
Yep.
Because this is specific to staff with students.
Right.
There is I think it's actually,
So, like Washington has a policy 4011. It's a civility policy. And like what it actually outlines is it says like, this is what we're here to do, and then it lists uncivil conduct. So, for example, conducting oneself in a discourteous or disrespectful manner when communicating or interacting with others includes but is not limited to directing vulgar, obscene, or profane gestures or words, taunting, jeering, inciting others to taunt or jeer, interrupting another individual repeatedly, raising one's voice in anger, imposing personal demands at times or settings where they conflict with assigned duties and cannot be reasonably met, derogatory terms, gesturing in a manner that puts other in fear for his or her personal safety, invading personal space, physically blocking an individual's exit from a room or location, remaining in a classroom.
Is that policy or
area.
procedure?
Policy.
That'd be interesting.
Wow.
And
So-
this is, I mean, I used to work in Lake Washington, and this is what we operated from. And so if something violated that in terms of an email, or if it violated that in terms of a meeting, I, as a teacher at the time, knew what my steps were, and I knew that I, based on this policy, was able to call a meeting and say, now.
What's the policy number?
4011. If you just Google Lake Washington civility,
Isn't like Washington a governance district now? They do policy governance. They were one of the original policy governance
I
districts.
don't know, I love them for their systems and structures. And then also has implementation, so individuals who perceive they have been treated in an uncivil manner will be urged to resolve their concerns promptly. If this is not possible, any person who needs help may seek assistance from X, Y, and Z.
So it's what is the policy number?
4011.
Okay. Can you forward the link? That'd be great. Christy, can you see if there's a draft 4011?
You can also just search Lake Washington School District Policy 4011.
Yeah, there we go.
Can I back up and just offer one reflection on this 64, modeling cultural, racial, and ethnic understanding and sensitivity? That I don't think it's entirely limited to what behaviors we interrupt in others. I think it also has to do with what behaviors and worldviews and self-understanding we cultivate in ourselves. And so I just really think this harkens back to that, creating a culture of mutual accountability for learning. Because as a white leadership team, we can't know what we don't know about our own perspectives that
Yeah.
come from a lens that is by definition limited. And so I'm just really excited about what is possible when each of us is committed to a learning journey to expand our ability to perceive more of the story. So modeling this cultural, racial, and ethnic understanding and sensitivity might not be possible from where we are today, or at least not as possible as it can be when we grow our own skills and capacities.
Yeah, and I think that I completely agree. I think that the required equity training is going to help with that.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
As long as we all take it seriously.
Sure.
Mhm.
I think we all still can model these things though, because we are continually learning.
Yes.
Continually asking questions, continually finding resources, so I think that is something we can ask of ourselves and this group to continue doing, is becoming a model for how do I learn and how do I then actively utilize that information, whether that's lifting up a voice that's been historically ignored, whether that's doing some reading for myself, whether, what that looks like.
There's no WASDA.
Yeah, and they do go by policy. This is a whole very interesting framework that they use, and it's policy governance, and there are courses on that at WASDA, but essentially the structure of this is that it sets the limits on how the superintendent carries out the goals for the board, but if it's not a limitation, it's basically, it's the opposite. It's here's what you can't do.
Rather than here's what you can.
Anything, the others, it's okay to do what,
Anything else?
yeah, as long as you don't do these things.
Yeah.
And the board sets the ends, which are the goals. And then the superintendent looks at the means to get there, and the board sets the kind of bumpers in the lanes, right, of what you can't do. Like, You can't overspend the budget. You can't, whatever it is. But it's Lake Washington was a forerunner in doing this across the country. And it's a pretty interesting way to govern. So just food for thought. But yes, the administrative policy on civility is, clearly there isn't one from WASDA, but this is it comes under civility. They also have a human dignity policy.
And I think it's just something to consider as we, and thinking about what's occurring at other school board meetings around our state. And some of the, Snohomish had to have law enforcement come in and their school board meeting. And so I think, just if we set, just like we would with our students, if we set clear expectations at the beginning and say, this is our map and this is how we can have these conversations, maybe we won't go that far.
Well, and just about exactly 2 years ago, the board signed the civility first clause agreement. So the board is a civility first organization, and I think that gives us perfect rights to expect that of those speaking to us as well.
I think we hope it does.
Yes.
I think, and
Gives us the right to expect it rather than.
I don't think it does.
Okay.
And I think that was part of my concern with it, right? Is
It limits what we can do.
no, it says we will engage this way. There is no boundary or accountability. And the piece that I want to I think that sometimes people think that because schools are paid for by tax dollars, that there should be a feeling of ownership, right? Like my property taxes do pay for these buildings. They do have a sense of ownership and care and caretaking. We also need to recognize that the people who are employed with the school districts are professionals, and this is their job, and that does not mean that they should not be communicated with or engaged with in a less than professional manner. And I think that that's something that we have to teach, and you have to teach that through boundaries. But sometimes because you are talking about something that people hold, hopefully, in their highest priority, which is their child, right? Sometimes that recognition of professionalism to the professional is lost, but the professional is not able to lose that because it is their job.
Right.
And then that creates a culture where people just absorb. And I don't think that's healthy, and I don't think that's right.
It'd be great to have a reflector for unprofessional attacks on district employees.
Yeah.
Policy that states, you've crossed a boundary.
Yes. Yeah.
We're not willing to receive this.
Yeah. And I think it starts with how the board models it, and it trickles down. And
Yeah, we've gotten some interesting emails out.
Yes.
we have.
And interesting comments in the Q&A,
And
board meetings.
And I can say from personal experience that had I received the types of communications that we are receiving now as a teacher in Lake Washington, I know that the people sending those would have been contacted by the district and told they could no longer contact me and be given a different person to contact. And I had families who had that conversation with staff for much less intense communication, who were given that message. And it doesn't mean that they weren't heard, it doesn't mean that it wasn't navigated, but it was a very clear boundary of, this is not how we engage.
We need to be explicit if we want to set expectations around treating one another with humanity.
Yeah.
We are, first of all, we're not unique. The difficulty that I have is, we've faced this in our communication, is that folks have expressed that you're not listening as a district because you haven't changed X, Y, or Z. And so creating a response that says, we hear you, and Brooke writes it, I don't know that how much it gets heard, but we hear what you're saying and we respectfully disagree. This is what we're going to do. But thank you
Yeah.
for contacting us and being willing to communicate. That is a human response. People often continue to ask the same question, expecting you may give a different response. You know, we probably as individuals have done it. Children certainly do it, right?
Oh, boy, howdy.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, again, I don't think it's an unusual situation, but when people are frustrated and lash out, that's where it has to be, okay, you know, we're not gonna engage in this kind of conversation. This is just rude.
Yeah.
So maybe there is a communications policy that needs to go into place about communications to and from district staff and try to figure out the broadest possible.
Yeah, and I think to, well, you brought it up, and to your point, I think the staff, we have policy around professional communication. We have expectations for staff.
Yeah.
But if they're impacted by a community member, even just, I've had staff concerned come to me about what they've seen that was read at a board meeting.
Yeah.
I've had students say, how could you read that out loud, when it was so insulting and infuriating? And so, how do you, it'll be easier when people are in person, because
Yeah.
then you can say, you know what, we're gonna stop here, you're not gonna talk about individual staff, you're not gonna comment, but this
Particularly
environment.
individual students.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's a line I'm always trying to walk very carefully on, because I've been looking at our policy 1400, which is meeting conduct, order, business, and quorum. It's about,
It doesn't address it.
yeah, it talks
Yeah.
about the only things we can, examples of uncivil comments include comments that are libelous or slanderous, are an unwarranted invasion of privacy, are obscene or indecent pursuant to FCC regulations, violate school district policy or procedure related to harassment, intimidation, bullying, or discrimination, incite an unlawful act on school premises or violate a lawful school regulation, or create a material and substantial disruption to the orderly operation of the board meeting. That's, according to our policy, that's where we can draw the line.
Yeah, and so you can modify, you certainly can expand on what would constitute, you know, I'm gonna stop you there, you know.
Right.
I'd like to get ad hominem attacks in there. I mean, honestly, attack the idea, not the person. But that is me speaking from a position of privilege.
I would say that if we move forward with this, you'll find these civility policies pretty standard anywhere on the I-5 corridor. I would also suggest that we consult legal counsel.
Absolutely.
You know, with the drafts of what we're thinking. Because it's a slippery, it's teetering on a slippery slope. You know, and I think that, you know, you want people to be able to speak their feelings, and you want them to be able to express their thoughts, and you also want it to be in a comfortable and a respectful way, you know.
I don't know, comfortable, but certainly
Yeah.
without being personal.
Yes.
Right,
Yeah.
'Cause sometimes it's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And we have to be okay with
Growth or progress requires some
Right.
discomfort.
Oh,
Yeah, so you
goodness.
can't get change
Yeah.
by doing the same thing.
that. Tell it my joints in high school. Oh.
Well, and it's also, you know, the idea, and I've heard members here speak about, you know, civility is a double-edged sword, because we don't want people to not be able to express whatever
Right.
their concerns are. At the same time, it shouldn't be at the expense of another individual feeling attacked. So, but what does that mean? You know, as a public servant, I have often had, I shouldn't say often, but occasionally have had very passionate individuals say some pretty nasty things. There's also that part of it, which is, you know what, we are public figures, and there's a certain level of, I don't want it, but there's a certain level of sort of with that job comes this idea that, all right, well, that hurt, but okay.
If you look at the movement of civil rights in America, there have been moments where calls for civility have really been at the expense of movement towards greater justice. And so I would be very careful crafting a policy framed around civility to ensure that it really is protecting individual freedom of speech within constraints of humane behavior and not trying to protect the status quo at the expense of demanding systemic change that is truly needed.
This is exactly what was discussed when
Right.
the civility clause came up.
Yeah.
Civility
Yeah.
first clause came up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So I think like for a great example, so recently this year, I did enact a civility policy in a meeting. And the rationale for it, which we have not experienced in our board meetings and want to be really clear that the parent involved was using really explicit language towards staff members. And so like the way that it rolled out was I said, you know, I gave a warning and said, this is not language that would be conducive in a professional setting. I need you to not use this language. If you continue to use this language, I will end the meeting. Parent made their decision, did not change their language. I excused all of the members and I stayed on the call with the parent and had a really honest conversation about I will not have staff members treated in this way when they are under expectations to remain professional, right? Like, so it's not about limiting the thoughts, but it's about at least equalizing the ground. Because the staff members can't respond in the way that the parent was responding, and they can't say what they actually want to say, because they're on the clock.
Right.
And I think, you know, I agree, right? I got to stay on the call.
Right.
But,
Right. You know, and that's kind of that's a piece of the territory, but if it is on a continuous basis of belligerence, you know, there's a point at which I heard you the first 3 times. I think that you got your point across.
Yeah.
But
Sure.
And that gets back to your point of, you know, there may be perspectives that we're hearing that say the district is on the wrong course. We're also hearing perspectives that say the district is on the right course, and we're hearing perspectives that say the district needs to make some adjustments. And there's a vast divide between I hear you and we're going to stay on this track, and I don't hear you and I'm ignoring you. And I think that what I can share from my perspective is that we absolutely hear our community. We appreciate the input from all sides of every issue. And that input is better metabolized by the district and turned into action when it's delivered with respect.
It's much easier not to get your back up defensively if it comes in with respect. I
Sure.
completely agree.
Well, I think having live comments again will be easier, not easier particularly, but people will have to take more responsibility for what they're saying, because they're saying it, and they're standing in a public meeting, and they're saying the words. And, you know, there's, even though the demand rightfully is for someone to state their name and state their community, there's still that level of anonymity that comes from being behind a computer screen. And so that sort of muttering under your breath, you know, that was a really good way to, you know, that's what that feels like a little bit. Because it's just this continued ticking of, you know, that's meant to be interrupting rather than process.
Right. And for those watching, you know, as board members, we see the comments as they come in. So although they may just be shared out at the appropriate time in the meeting, there is a sort of a constant influx that influences my experience as a board member, seeing what's being typed as it arrives. It does feel like a distraction when it's that constant restatement of perspectives that have already been shared.
Sure. And in the meantime, it's really exciting to see what people have to say too.
Yeah.
You know, because it feels really good that there is so much comment. I had a parent this morning in my office at work, they've been able to come to the board meetings
Yeah.
because, you know, they have 2 young kiddos. They're, you know, right in the same place where you guys are.
Yep.
We're super busy, and they've been able to tune in while making dinner and doing homework.
Yeah,
And that's powerful for that whole family.
and I don't wanna lose that.
And I don't want to lose that level of being able to offer what we're doing to a larger public. Like, that's really powerful.
And I've heard a couple of families who watch the board meetings together,
Mm-hmm.
which is just awesome.
Yes,
Mhm.
I've heard that too.
So, we've wandered a field which is good and fine in a retreat. I'd like to see if there are any other thoughts or comments on the survey. Anything that stood out to anyone else that we haven't gone over?
I think one of the hard things about just us as a board, right, is we really only get to interact during public meetings, right? Because we can't have quorum, we can't discuss business in, you know, outside of these Ps. My wonder is how can we, and I know Dr. Haddon tried to do this with the book study, but how can we create more of a team across the 5 of us? And how can we, you know, storm and form and norm and perform when we have to do all of those stages in public?
Yeah, and one of the things thank you for bringing up the book study. That was
Yeah.
one of the things that I think that we're getting to the point that hopefully we can resume that if people want to, or start it again rather, which was a policy governance book that Dr. Haddon assigned to the board members, and we each took a chapter and
I
talked
am
about
still
it.
ready to present my chapter. I've been waiting since March.
Of 2019.
Yeah, last March.
2020.
Yeah.
On the calendar, yeah.
So I'd love to get back to that too, because there's some fascinating things, and it might be something where we just go back through and share the previous ones and then continue on, or something that we start over with 2 new board members, or it might be something where we pick a different book. I don't have an answer. I am not the professional with the extensive experience that Dr. Haddon has.
Well, and that book, from my perspective, is an outstanding
Yes.
description of board service.
Yeah.
And you have an entirely new board.
Yes.
Yeah.
For the most part. I
True.
mean, well, it is a new board, even though you have 3 members who were here at the time. I think you might want to start over.
Well, and then there's the question, do we start over in December? To see if there are going to be new board members.
We'll never make it through the end of the book.
Exactly.
But
Well,
we'll
no.
just go in 2020.
Like, I think we could probably just collect the previous presentations
Mhm.
and just go back over them as we read the first couple of chapters and then continue on, but I'm open to it.
Could we recap could the new board members review what was shared before, and then we could begin wherever you folks left off and move forward until the
Yeah.
autumn when we learn
Yeah.
whether we continue?
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that. And we can, I think we can find where each of those presentations were. It was pretty much every single
So,
board meeting.
I'm wondering though, if we shifted it away from less of the book report style
Yeah.
and more towards like facilitated conversation about what
Mhm.
we read,
Yes.
right? That, I think that would actually help us process,
Mhm.
because the way I think it was rolling out before, because we wanted, it was almost like we were trying to educate board members and public and whatnot. And so there wasn't actually any conversation about what does this mean for us? And it might be nice to
Yeah.
push it deeper to that level so that we can trust each other as professional people to have done the
Mhm.
reading, but then to have
Sure.
Yeah.
a
Well, there's
conversation
that
about it.
clarity of purpose again, and then that moving forward into action, so.
Mhm.
I also appreciate that dialogue really supports us in just building our relationships.
True.
Yeah, I think we really have to, and I think we can do that because if we remember that our meetings are board meetings in public,
Yes.
not meetings with the public, we can definitely provide we can post the presentations for other people, for the public to review. We can post the book. We can have books available for people to check out. But I think we could also move forward without the expectation that we are teaching the chapter to the public.
Right.
Right. Well, you had mentioned the book to me, and so I bought a copy of it. And it's pretty intense, but it's not very thick.
Right.
Mhm.
So it, you know, I was able to get through the first, you know, 2 or 3 chapters before other stuff absorbed me. But and I have to admit, now it's in a box somewhere, so I'm out till August. But you know, but I think it would be really interesting to have a kind of a true, you know, book club style discussion
Yeah.
of even the pieces that we saw as the most valuable to each of us. Because we're each going to come to it from a different skill set, a different life experience, and I think that's super valuable for us to be team building in
Yeah.
that way.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we could absolutely resume that. I think that's a fantastic idea. You said it's gone until August.
It's gone until I unpack that box. So
Then why don't we resume in September? And then we'll start picking up. I love the idea of facilitated discussions rather than book reports.
Yeah.
Mhm.
What-
The other thing I'm thinking is, you know, we can't have quorum, but maybe what we could also look at is, are there things where we can work with one other person
gonna say, could we
on
partner?
something? Because I think, like, you know, the goals, for example, right?
Yeah.
The board asked me to draft them. I tapped into you as the board member, right, on that. So you kind of have a feel for how I can collaborate and how I do those things, right? But that doesn't mean that Marnie or Ann.
You can also change your format. You could do board study sessions. Like you could do a 2-hour meeting that is on a workshop night and do 1 hour of board study and 1 hour of workshop. There's no, you know, you don't have rules on that stuff,
I
right?
Yeah.
love the workshops. Those are so incredibly valuable for me at least.
Great.
What's that?
Well,
They're your favorite.
But
They all
again, the
are.
workshop is, it still can be a board workshop,
Yeah.
and what your topic is based on your study.
Right.
Right, and then you get public input
Yeah.
on that, rather
Mhm.
than,
Yeah.
you know, whatever.
Basically just swap out one of the presentations that we would normally have with.
Right.
Discussion
You know,
of
but you
whatever
could be
we
studying the
study.
chapter
Sure.
and then doing
Yeah.
some policy
Yeah.
and getting input on both.
Yeah.
But it's, you know, the idea is that it's your professional
Sure.
development
Yeah.
as a board.
Well, and I think one of the things for me in the last, you know, I've been here almost a year now, and because of COVID, we haven't met like this
Mhm.
in a setting that is live and in person. And I know that my personal communication style is definitely more suited to this kind of work. And as many of us who are in service and work with humans, this is what we do. And so I don't feel like my whole skill set has been able to come out
Yeah.
during virtual time. And I don't know, and I know a little bit about yours because of your policy work, and I know a little about yours, and and so I'm learning, but finding ways for us to, Ortiz and Joe about the icebreakers, but that kind of team building and problem solving together really does help set the tone then for where are our strengths and where are our challenges and how do we help each other meet the quality product that we want to create. And then, how do we continue that improvement?
Yeah.
Knowing who has which strengths and skills. And so that's a thing that for me, as a, not only a new board member who's still like on the treadmill trying to know all the things,
Yeah.
but is also still like learning who my colleagues are
Yeah.
and how to interact best with
Yeah.
whom and like what communication style you like best. What's your favorite kind of cookie? Like all the things that, I don't know about you yet. And so I'd love to
Oatmeal raisin?
perfect, done,
Let's
check.
take a favorite cookie pause.
Right?
Let's do it.
Well,
Let's do it.
It should happen, I'm telling you.
I think back, a couple of boards ago to, a point in time where just that board was really, really gelled and like really doing, just like we just clicked. And I remember one time Joe asked us, I think as an icebreaker, like, why do you do this? And I said, it's my hobby. And then Joe told me I need a new hobby. But like there is the ability for this to become like fun,
Yeah.
right? And for this to be like my hobby, like this is what I get a babysitter
It's
for.
really, really
Right.
important work,
Yeah,
and sometimes it's hard,
yes,
sometimes it's fun,
yes.
but it's a critical piece of the community.
It is. And I think of, and I don't intend for me to say hobby in a flippant way, right? Like I intend it to convey that I actually really enjoy coming to these meetings. And part of it's COVID, part of it's virtual, but it feels less connected like that.
Mhm.
It's not like I don't feel as connected to the board. And so part of me is thinking like, how can we create more ways to reestablish connection so that it can be things that we all look forward to coming and doing. Because if we're gonna spend 6 hours together on a
Right?
Wednesday,
Correct. So favorite cookie?
snickerdoodle, we might as well enjoy it.
True story.
Favorite cookie?
If we're talking commercial, it's double stuffed Oreos.
Oh, okay.
If we're talking personal, it's plain old simple chocolate chip.
See, chocolate chip. Yeah.
Right?
Can I say vegan chocolate chip cookie dough?
Yeah.
I'd rather have it
Absolutely.
unbaked.
Yes.
Really?
Dan?
Yeah.
Well, for me, it's Christmas sugar cookies with buttercream frosting.
Oh.
Because I do it with my children every year. It's a traditional thing we've done
Oh.
for 28, 30 years now. You know, we pick a day and we make these cookies together.
That's
And then we eat it
That's
as
cool.
Thank you.
That's
for that
super
reminder.
cool.
Because
And-
chocolate chip meringues are my holiday cookie.
I don't know what that is, but it
Christy's
sounds
off camera,
amazing.
But I gotta know, Christy, can you shout your favorite cookie?
I like all cookies.
Valid answer.
My current favorite is the macadamia nut,
Oh,
nice.
Ooh,
Okay.
Yeah, there's that.
chocolate dipped.
Oh,
Ooh,
yeah.
Personally, anything hot out of the oven
Oh, yeah.
it can be a favorite.
It's not a cookie, but I can really go for a lemon bar.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes.
Oh, I gotta make you passion fruit bars.
Oh,
Nice.
that sounds amazing.
But yeah.
Yeah, there you go. My favorite food though has got to be pizza.
That's number 2 for me. Tacos.
Mac and cheese.
Oh, tacos.
Mm.
Mac and cheese.
I could eat tacos every day for a year.
Yeah, I could do
That's
that
you.
pizza.
That's,
Like
good-
a wide noodle in a delicious
Ooh.
brown sauce tie with tofu and
Oh.
broccoli.
Yeah. You and I could have lunch together.
Yes,
Like,
please.
I eat curry every day.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Good.
In all of its forms.
Great.
Yes.
There's your icebreaker.
yeah.
Is that it? Okay.
And now we're all
Okay,
hungry.
Right?
Country,
Good
you're
thing
welcome.
there's pie, right?
I'm
think
smarter
we're,
than that.
That's for the workshop. Save that for the
Okay.
workshop.
I also think we have 3 very tall board members.
Yes.
3.
I had no
And
idea
I
how
had
tall
no
you
idea.
I was surprised with how tall you were, and also I knew you in person, but the graduation was the first time I met Damien, and I was like, oh, both tall.
Yeah.
Yep, we have a very tall school board.
Yeah.
Tall people get ahead.
That's right.
Because you can run farther faster, that's why.
No, their heads are above yours.
Is that what it is?
Tell people
Oh,
they're
okay.
bonk when they walk through a
Yeah.
doorway.
All through high school. Because I didn't know where my head ended. I grew 4 inches one summer.
Oof.
One
I did
summer.
that. I did that between 4th and 5th grade. I left
Oh.
4th grade 5'6", came back 5th grade 5'10".
Oh,
Oh, boy.
Yeah, I was literally dropping my stirrups every week.
wow.
Wow.
I
Yeah.
cannot relate to any of this Scandinavian conversation.
Oh, no, it's Scottish.
Oh, it's
Ah.
Scottish?
Dutch
Okay.
and German.
Scottish as
See,
well.
I wanted to be tall when I grew up. Didn't quite work.
No, no. I am 5'10", you just don't see it.
But there you go. Perfect.
Well, I've
The
spent my
imaginary
life,
hat.
my adult
Yeah.
life carrying children through doorways on my
Yep.
shoulders, and you have to like
Yep.
really duck
Yep.
because you just don't want to whack your baby on the.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just married into tall, so he gets stuff off the top shelves.
Yeah.
That's what my wife did.
I have a better sense of
Good to have a
balance,
tall ally.
much
There you
lower
go.
sense of.
My best
Center of
friend in the
gravity.
whole wide world is 4'9"3/4", and the first time she went to the grocery store with my brother, who's 6'8", and realized that we just talked to each other over the aisles, she was like, "What?" And I was like, "What?"
Doesn't
Right
everyone do
there.
this?
Right there.
Wow. 6'8".
Yeah, he actually has to duck.
Wow.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
pretty big. I think, isn't John, was he 6'7"?
7.
Yeah.
And Sterling's taller now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, his Sterling speech at
Wasn't that
graduation
great?
That was so
was
great.
so awesome.
I
Yeah.
love seeing the emotion on John's face.
Yeah.
when it's-
Oh, so
Yeah.
That was
It was
beautiful.
sweet.
Yeah.
Yeah, graduation was pretty awesome.
It was awesome.
That was so great. That like
Yeah.
the job that the admin and staff did setting everything up,
Yeah.
the everything
Yeah.
the students said, yeah, it was
It was
just,
beautiful.
Weather was great.
yeah.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
I did have a nice mask for
Yeah.
next week.
Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely should have packed the sunscreen.
Yeah,
Yeah, it was, yeah, it was a good ending to a tough year.
yeah, it really was.
You have other stuff, don't you, Brooke?
Yeah, I do. A couple other things.
We're driving him nuts.
No.
Let's not
No,
talk
not
about
at
work
all.
for just a little bit
Not
longer,
at all.
see how long Brooke can go.
But we do have a limit before we talk about nothing work related for an hour.
That's true, you get a whole
True,
hour
true.
Yeah.
of non-work related.
Yes.
So I'd like to suggest that we think about turning this feedback into goals for us.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of what it sounded like is professional development and recognition of efforts and working with the superintendent leadership team on
Mhm.
your goals and collaborating outside our district also.
And within.
Yes.
I think you just wrote him. Good job.
Good
Well
job,
done.
Brooke.
Yeah, committing to board visits, I
Oh,
think,
God, I love those.
yeah.
And actually, that was one of the things that I wanted to talk about is as soon as it's safe and the staff feels comfortable with it, I want to get us back into regular
I
visits.
think we should
I love that.
minimally plan one for the fall, one for the spring, so they
For-
see each semester.
I mean,
For those of us who are working during the day, could some of the board visits be evening events?
we might be able to do that. I'm trying to figure out what the best benefit for that. We wouldn't have students, but we might have staff there after hours for particular reasons.
Do a concert.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you can do
There's
concert.
concerts,
or
sporting
play
events.
I mean, there's lots of those.
Athletic event,
Yeah.
yeah, where you,
I'm gonna try to get into, I'm,
gonna make Marty go to an athletic event.
well,
Band director tried to make me once.
See?
Actually, I think I had to sit in the bleachers with my flute like 3 times before I said, if you want me in your band program, you're gonna have to let me out of these sportsy things.
so I tried to make myself a commitment my first year on the board to make it to one event from each sport, and then COVID happened.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm gonna do that this year. I'm gonna make that commitment to
Nice.
myself, and I'm making it here in public.
Well, and it could be, you know, if your thing is seeing the band play or whatever, that you make a commitment that you're gonna go to, I don't know, 3 evening events over the year or something like that, where you,
Well, I do want to expand
President.
beyond sports too.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
where
And
it's,
open houses are going to be a
Perfect.
thing someday again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It-
And
Theoretically.
parent-teacher nights.
yep,
Anytime there's an open house, that would be it.
yeah, that's an excellent
Yeah.
time to
When
go.
the
Yes.
board could be there
Yep,
separate.
open house.
and- yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
And we can talk to staff and students and parents.
Mhm.
And it's always, the principal always likes to be able to say, and you know, superintendent and the board president are in the house for the general session, or board members so-and-so are here tonight. It's a good way to be there and to, you know, just be available for people.
So as a board member, can we just watch the calendar for opportunities and then let
Yep.
Christy or you know if
You
you're gonna
let
be
me
able to
know,
come?
and then
So we
I
can-
just say, hey, you know, Marty's gonna show up tonight, just be on the lookout for her, so that, you know, it's always nice to acknowledge.
Mhm.
Sure.
Yeah.
And we can either avoid quorum or
You can be there
agendize
as
the
a
meeting if.
You don't have to agendize it if you are not speaking about public
Ah.
business. You're entitled,
Right,
because
just
it's
a member
a
of the
public
community.
event,
Right.
for you to go. I mean, again, you wanna, if you always wanna play it safe, you say, hey, you know, we're going, you let Christy know and she'll put it out there. But as, you know, it's like if you all show up at the
Oh, first-
concert,
Sure.
you all showed up at the concert.
Right.
And there is some gray area when it's talking about school function.
Right.
Right. If it's something talking about school function and we're there, even if
Right.
we're separate and never talk to each other, it can be
Yeah.
taken as we were all there officially gaining information to do
Mhm.
our jobs.
Right, and it's always safer, like when we had the community conversations, we'd always put, you know, the board may attend.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But then,
Sure.
if you don't, you don't.
Sure.
I look forward to being able to be involved again and be at
Oh,
in-person
yeah.
events again. It's Yep,
Oh, yeah.
strange year of not opting into those things.
My 16-year-old will love that.
Yeah, exactly.
Mom, what are you doing here?
Yeah.
I have a little introverted self for years. It's like, this is amazing.
Well, my poor
Don't get me
kid,
wrong.
Kayla, my oldest kiddo, she has had to put up with me through her whole schooling life because when she started kindergarten, she was down on the other campus and I was working for Readiness to Learn, whose office was right at her kindergarten playground. So we had this whole little pack of kindergartners. They were like our little fan club. And so then that was kindergarten. And then all the way through grade school, I was like on the PTA. I was in the, and I was always in the building. And so like this year, I'm like, hey, Kayla, my name's going to be on your diploma. My signature's going to be on your diploma. She's like, of course it is. I'm like, hey, Kayla, I'm going to be a graduate. Of course you are.
Yeah.
She's always been such a good sport. But my younger one, not so much. Why are you here? Am I in trouble? Who are you going to talk to? Why are you wearing that? What are you doing? Stop it. Like,
I'm very curious how Hazel will react to that.
yeah.
In the first 5 years, she will adore it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Yes.
then I'll be done.
Yes.
Yep. Yep. And then it's.
And the last thing I had was student reps.
Mhm.
We've made the change to 2.
Very much looking forward to that.
We lost 1, so we don't have overlap. So there's a couple of things at play here. One is, how do we want to bring on 2 members? And the other is, I've had a comment from a student who is speaking for several other students as well, who has suggested that there be a vote among the students for who their rep is.
I think that's a
That's
great
a great
idea.
idea.
I was suggesting at least they vote on a couple of candidates for us to pick from. At
Yeah.
least.
I wonder about having some sort of a nomination practice and then have those nominees opt in to being on the ballot.
The hard part is that historically, with the exception of the last 2, not this last one, but the one before, we have had maybe one person want to do it.
It might be a very easy vote,
Yes,
if there's a
right.
vote.
yes.
It also may be, you may want to consider options like, we've not really, well, and again, different boards have different opinions. We've not awarded credit. It's been volunteer service. The other thing I am cautious about is when it's a vote of the students, because then it's a popularity contest.
I was thinking, because
And
there's
then
connotations
Your
there around.
disenfranchised student that you may want to have seated on your board does not become the student who's selected.
That was the concern that I had as well.
Yeah.
You
You know, you have ASB stuff. If you're gonna go with student vote, then maybe you ask ASB to give you a candidate, and maybe the other candidate just applies or something like that to get your 2.
That would actually be an interesting way to do it, have one of them be elected.
Yeah.
So every other year,
Mm.
the high school elects someone. Well, and we've allowed people to apply who are not high schoolers, or who are rising high schoolers.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So-
The thing that you have is that it's not really a well-known seat, and
Yeah.
Mhm.
what's my commitment and why would I do
Right.
that? And
Well, and part of that was actually the student's point was, if it became a vote in the school, it would garner more attention.
yeah,
There's
Possibly.
something about incentivizing this, and you mentioned that we've chosen not to have it be for credit, but within the limits of what has integrity for, I mean, we certainly don't want to turn it into you get a $20 coffee card for coming, but how to incentivize this so that students really do embrace it as an opportunity for learning and service as opposed to just an obligation. I think we could attract some really neat candidates who might not win the student popularity contest, or perhaps they would, but somehow finding a way to incentivize it so that it appeals to a broader selection of
I
students.
Yeah, that's
think
procedure.
credit would also reach students who maybe aren't on track for graduation.
Our procedure actually says half a credit, half an elective credit.
yeah.
For successful board service.
Mhm.
Well, more important for high schoolers too might even be that it's service learning.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and part of the getting the word out, I want to get into advisory groups to talk about what the school board
I was
does.
gonna ask how the teachers are involved, like teachers, counselors, people who know the kids best besides their
They
families.
do
Like, do they have buy-in?
recommendation.
Okay.
Yeah, and they're part of the application piece.
Okay, that's what I thought, but it's sometimes it feels really cool when a teacher nominates you for something, because it means that you have value for them in that course of study.
My sense of this is that getting back to, again, kids have a cycle of 4 years. And for the
Mhm.
last year and a half, they haven't had school. So
Right.
to know what high school is about, I think that part of it is just you or board members getting out there saying, hey, this is the role I play, this is what we do, this is,
Yeah.
how governance works, getting it to feel important.
Mhm.
Otherwise, it's just like, well, who are you and why do I care?
Right.
Would it be possible, this is a really out of left field suggestion, so let me know if it wouldn't work, but would it be possible to actually have a 15-minute segment during an assembly at the high school? To
Sure.
just talk as a board about what board service feels like?
The concern I have with that is you don't get student engagement at an assembly. That's the value of the advisory groups.
Mhm.
I talked to CWP classes, contemporary world problems classes, you both know that, last year, virtually. And I was actually shocked that I got engagement from the
Mhm.
students with asking questions about what happened, and
Right.
that sort of thing.
Mhm.
So I think that there is value there,
Mhm.
but I think that the way we can reach them is actually to sit down in a small group
Mhm.
and have a conversation rather than
Mhm.
a presentation.
Right.
I like advisories because that's very, you're not just speaking to a service group that already knows what it's like to be a leader. You're not talking to a group of students who are AP students who already know what it's like to be, considered smart. You're talking to an across the board proletariat, and there's going to be a kid or two in there that's like, that could be me. So I think I love that idea.
Yeah.
And if we all kind of came to it, as many of us were willing and able to go to different advisory groups to,
Yeah, you could do it
Yeah.
that way. That'd
with
be
a
interesting.
kind of a script,
Yeah,
this
right.
is what we're all about. This is my role in the board. This is how I came to service. It gives kids that like spark of like, oh yeah, I could put this on my college applications. I could, or this is going to give me a skill, or just, oh yeah, I still have 8 community service hours to do. How was I going to do that? And it gives kids that like spark of, oh yeah, that's the thing I could do. That's easy, right?
Mhm.
And I want to talk to the CWP classes, but I want to get them
They're
earlier.
seniors, you
Yeah.
want to get them younger.
Yeah, you do.
And it was valuable for them because they then knew the importance of voting for
Totally.
those positions, but
Mhm.
connecting younger
Yeah.
with students to let them know how we're influencing their experiences.
Yes. Well, not even just role models, like, this is why you get involved in high school.
Mhm.
This is why you choose a club. This is why you choose to be in an extracurricular that's a passion for you. This is how you get involved in the bigger community. Because if we, because if our mission really is to make, take our island kids and make them into global learners, that's how they get started.
Mhm.
So,
So is there an actionable item that we can
Well, it's
suggest for our next meeting?
It's deciding how we want to bring people into that role. So the question is, do we want to have students vote? Do we want to have students vote on one, both?
What if we had one seat filled by the ASB president?
That is difficult.
Yeah.
Because they have a huge role,
Okay.
right? So you could have one appointment by ASB, and then, because ASB is, they have an executive committee, but every class has ASB
That might be a
officers.
good one.
mhm.
Yeah,
So vote them up from ASB.
an
and
appointment from ASB.
Yeah.
And
However they do it.
However whether they choose to vote it or have the executive board decide or whatever. And then one that we continue the previous,
Yeah, through an
method.
application
Yeah.
process
Well,
directly.
what if we shifted it, so if I think about it through a high cap lens, right? Part of the barrier with identification of high cap is the application itself,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
So what if it is a consideration process where anyone can nominate anyone? And then that person has a choice about whether or not they move forward.
I like that, I like that a lot.
Because then a
Yeah.
teacher can say, hey, I want Ann on, but Marnie can also say, I want to put myself on.
Or what if there's something specific to that where it's tell us you're interested, we will help you with the application explicitly. Like,
Yeah.
if you're nominated from
Mhm.
someone, and we'll check to make sure you're interested, if you nominate yourself, whatever it is.
Yep.
And then, this is adding more work to the staff, but someone within staff will say,
Well, I think
we'll
it
help
should
you
be
with
the
this.
board itself.
Or yeah,
I think it should be,
assign-
you know, come to a workshop, we'll walk, you know, we
For
can.
sure.
yeah.
We can have a workshop, talk about this is what the
Yeah.
role is,
Mhm.
this is
Nice.
what it.
We each
looks
have a
like.
school district email. We can
I mean,
communicate that way with the kiddo. You
so
know?
the process has been, they fill out this application, they turn their grades in, they get all this stuff from their teachers, right? And some of those things are expectations of things that people do. They're also indicative of white dominant culture.
Mhm.
Yep.
And if our intention is to dismantle that, then
Mhm.
why do I have to fill out a piece of paper to tell you I'm interested? I'm standing here telling you
Yeah.
I'm interested.
Yeah,
Right.
at very least, swap the order of those.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
tell
Yeah.
you you're interested.
Okay,
Good,
come
let's-
to a workshop,
yeah,
let's talk about it.
let's work on this.
Let's have a conversation, and at the end of it, you already have everything done.
Mhm.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well,
So
because
we're
then
engaged onboarding process.
yes, and we're offering a skill set. Because I'm thinking about if we want freshmen and sophomores to be leaders with us when they're young and they're learning, they haven't applied for jobs yet. They don't know what a job application looks like.
Mhm.
They don't have that skill set yet to fill out a whole bunch of papers and get references and do all that thing. And it's daunting. It's hard work.
Well, it's also, it implies a certain family dynamic, it implies a certain socioeconomic dynamic to
Yep.
know how to do
Yeah.
that.
And a relationship with your teachers,
Yeah.
relationship
Versus-
with staff, how to navigate paperwork and get paperwork where it goes,
Mhm.
having the technology to do that work. I
Request
mean, so-
information from
yeah.
people.
I know we're looking at as young as rising ninth graders. And I hadn't thought about this when we discussed it, but you know, kids have to get here.
Mhm.
Our kids in the past have gotten here mostly on their own because they can
They
drive.
Right.
So are we putting up a barrier that we didn't consider otherwise,
Interesting.
right? What if there is no parent or person?
Mhm.
So what, would it be something to look at whether or not we could offer transportation in some form?
Well, again, if there were permission of parent/guardian, then,
Mhm.
you know,
I could
I
drive
could pick
them.
them up,
Yeah,
you
you
could
could
pick
do
them
it.
up,
You could
right?
rotate.
Sure.
I could do something like that.
Yeah.
Sure.
We
Based
just
on
have to be
what it is.
cognizant of that.
Yeah.
That, you know, we can get you here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
But I think, you know, looking at it from that perspective, I think we could actually do some skilled teaching. And then the other piece, the part that, you know, people like about it is that it's interview practice.
Mhm.
But the interview is not necessarily indicative of, like, whether we select you, right? It's, we look at the whole picture.
Yeah, and, you know, again, why are you doing this? Why do you want a kid on your board? I'm asking the question, why is this so important to you?
I think of what, like, Matthew Simmons brought to the board. And he was an amazing advocate for what was happening at a student level. And he, in a very quiet way, would say, this is what I want you to pay attention to.
Mhm.
And that's what I appreciated about him.
That's one of the key things for me is,
Mhm.
A, what matters to the students?
Mm-hmm.
And B, how do our policies and procedures affect them?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
A phrase I've heard,
Oh, I'm sorry, please.
a phrase I've heard recently that I've really enjoyed is "nothing about us without us," and it's the idea that we can be in a room of adults, and again, you know, we are white, we are, you know, have the privilege of being able to drive here and all those things, and it gives kids a seat at the a literal seat at the table and a voice in the leadership. And so for
Yeah.
me, that's what's important is, you know, we're not talking about them, you know, we're talking with them.
Yeah.
And they are representative of, you know, the student. So,
And I think, you know, I think the student report of the athletics and the you know, the concerts and the activities and the plays, all of that is good. But I think that's, if we limit the role to that, that's very superficial.
mhm.
And what I really appreciated about what Matthew did was he kind of said, okay, this is my box, I'm gonna push through it, and went deeper than that. And I think that was helpful to me. And so I think shifting how we utilize them, you know, seeking out their input, and we tried to do this with Rakeem, where we tried to talk to him before the meetings to like make sure he had the information he needed to engage and to participate. So I think it looks
Well, I thought
Yeah,
Jordan
like
was
that.
fantastic at
Yeah.
putting his input in.
Absolutely.
It took prompting, but
Yeah.
I'm fine with that.
And
Well,
I
with
wish
the
he
age
had
group it
stayed
Yeah.
Yeah.
because I think he could have gone deeper with some mentorship. Is there? Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I'm interrupting.
No, that's okay.
Jordan just had the additional obstacle of COVID, so I feel like I would have loved to have been able to know more of his whole personhood, and
Yeah.
because he was limited to a little box on a screen through my entire
Yes.
office,
Yes.
I just think we should give him a lot of credit for participating in
Oh,
that format.
absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then there's also just that basic precept that, you know, the people most impacted should be centered. And if we're looking at who is most impacted by school board decisions, it's students. The students are who we're here to serve.
Absolutely.
So to engage school board members who are among the population most impacted by our decisions feels necessary.
Now, when we have student members on our board at the WCT, that junior board member has a mentor assigned to them, essentially. Does that happen here?
In
Yes.
the past, it
Yeah.
did.
I basically assigned myself in that role because I
Linda
knew that
was always their mentor.
Oh,
Jordan
the
and
board.
Andrew were busy and you two were
Perfect.
busy.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Just so that they have a person.
We also.
Because that can be way less daunting than like, I just need to talk to the people if I have my person.
I met with
We,
Jordan.
remember we centered them
a
in
couple of
between
times.
two board members they could lean over
Perfect.
to.
Yeah.
But yeah, Linda took it upon herself as the board president. She would recruit, you know, she'd get out there in the classes like you want to do, and then when the student
Perfect.
was selected, she made sure that she touched base with them. And Christy does some of that too, just to make sure, hey, are your notes ready? And, you know, do you want me to, that kind of thing. But again, the last 18 months are not the best example.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, I just didn't know what the
Yeah.
history was.
And as you were sharing, you know, how much more we could learn if we had collaborative partnerships upon the board, you know, that you two got to know each other in a different way and got to know one another's professional strengths in a different way when you
Yeah.
did this project together. In that same way, it would be great if a student board member could be partnered with a board member for a select
Yep.
project. Like, I'd love to say to our
Yeah.
next student board member, will you work with me at the upcoming legislative session to
Yeah.
connect with
Exactly.
our
I love that.
representatives?
We did a trip to Olympia with our student board member when it was Sydney Ackerman, and that made a huge difference to her. And the whole board went down to the Hill for the Ledge
That's cool.
Day, and it was a great experience, right? And it centered her. We also have had, and this year you could do it because it's in Bellevue with parent permission. There is a huge student board member thing at the board.
It's
at the
awesome.
That would really light a
Boston
kid's
County
fire, I
Council,
think.
Right?
Yeah.
They get to come, they get to participate, there are student-only sessions, and, you know, they don't get to go to the president's reception or whatever. But it really, we've not taken them to Spokane, but we've done it when it's been in Bellevue, because a parent typically, they'll come and the board puts the parent and student up.
That's cool.
And that's actually where Andrea and I actually have to talk a lot, is we
That's
moved
cool.
back from the conference in Bellevue.
Poor Brooke.
That's how you spark a leader, is when they get to see their peers doing the same work.
Yeah.
That's super powerful.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And they
Especially-
have a whole, there's like a
Oh, that's awesome.
cooperative competition that they do with
Nice.
student board members and stuff. So yeah, there's a whole, we're not, you know, unique in having student board members. The thing that, that's unfortunate is that, you know, we never got really good at it, and then COVID happened.
Right.
So, and it really is also about who the student is that steps up.
Are there districts that are doing a really
And of course,
excellent job?
And of course, Damien and I went to the WASDA conference sessions that,
And
of
one of
course,
the other
it-
sessions.
yeah, and those
Learn from
students,
them.
they
Yeah,
didn't
for
even
sure.
get credit. They were self-motivated to
Wow,
do
that's cool.
the service, and they did like huge study projects that benefited the district.
Mhm.
You know, again, the one that sticks in my head is this one young woman did a study of the math program in the district and why there were students who performed differently in one particular course than in another, and it was just a topic that was of interest to the board, and they assigned it to her and gave her the district resources to figure it out, the data and a support person, and she wrote a study for the district on a particular topic.
That's cool.
For no credit. And these kids were totally excited about their work service on the board.
Well, as I recall, they ran the session at WASDA too.
They did.
Like
They
the-
did.
The,
Board president, the
was
superintendent
there.
were there, but the kids really ran the show.
Wow.
That's great.
About what student rep life was for them.
So we could utilize the student rep to dive into, what are the conversations we need to have that we don't even know.
Mhm.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
That's absolutely the most valuable
Yeah.
thing
Mhm.
we can get. So we need to figure out which of these is going to be for 1 year and which is going to be for 2 years
I
also.
think ASB should be one, because that turns over every year.
Well, but just for this first time,
Right.
to get them staggered.
Oh, gotcha.
Why don't you
Yeah.
see if you get to before you get excited about creating this? I mean, it's
think-
hard to get
So if we,
students to step up. I think
Mhm.
you need to do some recruiting and see if you can't get to.
yeah, so if we have one, then they'll be there for 2 years if they're
Right.
welcome.
Mhm.
One, if we get two, then we'll just decide which one of them is for one and which is for
And
two.
you can
There
just
you go.
draw
Just for-
straws.
Yeah, we can do
Yep.
that.
I
Because
would
there's nothing that
recommend-
says you can't do it again.
Right.
I would be a little hesitant to say let's just recruit and then decide who gets one and who gets two. I would rather begin with an assumption that if we get two, then we lean into the one that's appointed by ASB has a 1-year term,
Right.
and the one that's
I think that's fantastic.
appointed through this nomination, self or other nomination process gets two.
I think-
Just so that we don't get into the position of feeling as though there could be an implication of favoritism.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic.
Or you flip a coin, but yeah.
But
Yes.
I like coming in with if we have two, this happens.
It also helps the student have some clear expectations about what they might be getting in for.
Mhm.
Cool. Well, when we get to the part where, we're ready to go into classrooms and talk to kids, I'd love to be part of that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Do you have a timeline? Do you want to do this as soon as we get back in September? Start
I'd love to
visiting
do.
and, once we're in 2 weeks, people are pretty set in their
Yeah.
patterns and can welcome visitors, I think. So, if we gear ourselves toward the end of September.
It'd be great to have the student board members on the team in time for the conference.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yes.
So
That's a good goal.
that means that we need to do it in September, not the end
Right.
of September.
Mhm.
So as
Well,
soon
if
as
your
school comes
appointment
back.
could be the
So
end of
that-
September meeting.
Yeah.
That would be the October workshop, would
Yes.
be the let us help you fill everything out, and then appoint November so that they can go to the conference.
The meeting's after the conference, so you really want
No.
to,
Our workshop comes first, so we have that
Yeah.
at the workshop and then
You
we
appoint him in
make the
October.
choice at the end of October.
It'd be
you could
pushing it
appoint
to
him the
point-
workshop night and just call it a special meeting too.
Yeah, we can do
I mean,
that.
again, I feel your excitement. I just don't know if we're gonna get,
Right.
Well,
kids.
and I think that the sooner that we can get some of the board members in those
Mhm.
advisories, the more
Absolutely.
likely
I think
we
so.
are to get kids.
yep.
Well, and this can be a starting point.
Yeah.
This can be,
Well,
because everybody's
right.
readjusting to stuff.
And if we have one this year and we,
Yep.
if we just have a
Yeah, I
bunch of
was
them
gonna
this
say,
year-
you
Yeah.
might, maybe you go for one in the fall and one in the spring and create a cycle that way.
Sure. I feel like we could recruit for 2, see where we
Yeah.
get.
Yeah. see
Yeah.
what
And if we
you
get one strong candidate, fantastic.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
I don't know, guys. We signed up for Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe today. I have
Okay.
47 children
Oh
signed
my
up for theater.
Oh, that's
I have room
awesome.
for 20 on my
royalties?
stage.
Ooh, that's less awesome.
3 days.
royalties for
Yes.
that? You do?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
For kids?
Yep.
for everything.
Yep. For everything. Oh yeah, you know.
After talking to you, I'm like, how did you go into theater business? It's expensive.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
So you have room for 20, you might have to do 2 versions.
Oh, we're gonna double cast it.
Yeah,
Nice.
Yeah.
that's adorable.
It's-
Good luck to you.
It's I'll just be under my desk rocking back and forth.
Yeah.
It'll be fine. So kids want to do stuff.
Yes.
They're ready to
Yeah.
re-engage.
Oh, it's- yeah.
They're ready to move forward. Their parents want them to do stuff and
Yeah.
be a thing like it's happening.
That's great.
So,
I'd like to take the discussion of non-school stuff and say, we're at 5:30.
Yeah.
Let's end the retreat.
Okay.
Christy's gone.
Christy's out to dinner, get to dinner, and I'm in charge of turning the.
So thank you
cameras on.
everyone who stopped by, stopped in to see us talk to each other randomly. Hopefully you learned something or got something you want to talk to us about. If you do, you can always email the board or talk at a public comment or join us for a workshop to talk about the items on the agenda. We'll be doing that tonight about the budget. You ready, Dan?
I'm ready.
And about the notification of authorities procedure. Thank you, and good night.
Do we get to see how many people log on?
I don't know.
oh yeah.
I'm
Just a
I'm
minute.
very
We're
curious.
still
Watch
on.
this
Yeah, we're still on.
zero,
I'm
and then you're
gonna
sitting here
get
talking
the
to your
directions
camera.
on how to turn it off.
I think I'm trying to reposition myself so that I wasn't just right behind your head.
Yeah,
Right?
I was trying to sort of sit like
Cozy
this.
up
and-
too.
Right.
Okay, so what'd she say? She said.
Just turn the power off.
Just unplug it.
Buttons,
I
hit
mean-
the off buttons, the ones that are red. Okay. It still says that it's on though.
I think I'm gonna find a restroom.
I
Excuse me.
believe that this is not recorded.